That's right. That's right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Sunday show. We are live. It is 2 p.m. Central. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Austin Archer. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I got some announcements to run through, and then we're going to have a little ceremonial changing of the face here in a second. So first of all, I am and will continue to be Zen mode on all the shows at all times. I'm even doing it on my Twitch stream. It's been just so much fun. So for the people who didn't want to call because they figured that their dishonesty would trigger my anger and they would face the consequences, that's just not going to happen anymore. It's just fine. But also, Austin's going to be mainly steering. We are primarily looking for theist callers. I wanted to make it where the screeners only accepted theistic callers, but we are going to allow a maximum of one of the 6 lines be occupied by an atheist person to begin with, because what we find is occasionally some will sit on hold for 2 hours while we're taking other calls, waiting to get in, and who knows what's going to happen. But well, here's what we want to know. We want to know what you believe in, particularly with relation to gods and supernatural claims and things like that. And not just why you believe it, but why you think other people should share that belief. What is it? Why should Austin and I agree with you on whether or not there's a God and what we do or don't know about a God and all this stuff? And it's genuinely, today would be one of the absolute best days to call. The lines are open right now for theists, but we have to address something as a side issue first. And that is, when we were raising money for recoveringfromreligion.org, I agreed that if we hit $75,000, I would shave my face but leave the mustache and not mess with it for a month. That month is now over, and I fucking hate this. It's annoying. It is at the length where it is obnoxious when I try to kiss, when I try to eat, when I try to, I don't know, do any. Hi, I'm Wilford Brimley, and I have diabetes. And it's true, I do have diabetes, but I'm not Wilford Brimley. So in that,
I can't believe you don't like the mustache life, Matt. I live the mustache life all the time, but obviously I've got my own issues to deal with.
Yes. I wore a mustache in the Navy because I couldn't have a beard, but now that I've got the beard and it's become a trademark and all that. But here's the thing. If I remember right, didn't we set a goal where Austin would have to shave off just half of his mustache? What's up with that?
Listen, I've been getting a lot of comments from the Line audience on my various channels on Instagram, TikTok, on YouTube of people saying, "Hey, where's the half stash? I'm supposed to dye it 2 different colors, then I'm supposed to shave half of it, and then I'm supposed to shave the whole thing." I am not welching. I want everyone to know this. I am not welching. I think some people in this audience know I'm a professional actor. The reason why I had to delay it the first time, as I said, I'm filming a film in a week that I have to have the mustache for. Once that's done, I'll do it. Immediately that weekend when I was doing it, I booked another job that shoots next week. So I need 1 more week of time, and I will make good on my promise for recovering from religion. I promise. I will do it. So
I don't know about you guys, but I believe him. But just in case, here's what we're going to do. I have my clippers, and right here live to start the Sunday show, I'm going to take this mustache off. We have to go to a wedding in 2 weeks, and so I want to regrow the mustache and goatee, but I don't want it long. And so I figured it'd be really good to show Austin how to make sure he shaves just half of it correctly. So when I've got here, I'm going to take off the right here.
Okay, that's solid. This is a good tutorial.
The thing is, I
And then
left
you
the
probably need to
guard
make it.
on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nice. Yeah.
So that's
Okay, this
kind
is
of how
okay.
you,
See,
you
I think
start.
you look kind of awesome. Can I see what you look like? Because I want to. Yeah. So my thing is, I have to look like that for a week. I have to walk around in public. That's the. So I think I'm gonna look pretty cool.
Okay. We have raised over
Okay.
$96,000 for recovering from religion. And because of that, I took off my trademark beard and suffered around with a mustache for most of a month or all of a month. And now that that's over, I'm going to grow it back. And this is only the second time in the 20 years that I've been doing live call-in shows that the audience has been able to see me without facial hair. And the other time was when I did the Atheist Experience in drag. But we are now officially starting to grow back out. Here you go. Here's the secret hidden face that none of you have been able to see. Kudos to everybody for raising so much money from recovering from religion. We're very happy, honored that you guys watched it here. Very happy that the audience participated and supported a great organization. And if you're not familiar, you can go to recoveringfromreligion.org. The purpose there is to help people who are struggling with their religious views. It is not there to make you an atheist or anything else. There are trained counselors there. Don't worry. We'd all be happy if you gave up your religion, but we'd also be happy if you came up with a good reason to believe it and could share that with us. Because if it turns out there are good reasons to buy into a religion, I would like to know that. I would like to not be wrong. I would like to not sit around thinking, oh, there's no good reason to believe in God when there is. And so if you've got that good reason to believe in a God, this is your time to actually call in and do that. But yes, I'm now barefaced, which means if you think I'm a liar, I'm now a barefaced liar. Here we
Yeah,
go.
I want to say, speaking of what you're saying to theists, hey, if there's a good reason we want to know. I had somebody in my audience recently ask me, they said, hey, what's the best argument for God and why is it presuppositional apologetics? And I
Ah,
said, perhaps incorrectly. I responded, perhaps incorrectly. I said, I'm not sure there is another argument format that I've ever heard. I'm not sure that in all the time that I've done this show, I've heard people make arguments that don't require some form of presuppositional, either a premise or presupposed facts or conclusions, and bad faith apologia to explain away the aspects of reality that do not support their presuppositions. But if you are a theist and you feel like you've got a solid argument that does not require any form of presuppositional apologetics, what a great opportunity to call in and shut me up and put me in my place. I actually would genuinely like to be able to say, oh, okay, I can see how that argument does not require any presupposition or any bad faith apologia. But we'll see.
well, we do have caller on the line. Just as a reminder, couple quick things. If you're a theist, get your calls in. We are ready to hear you. And also, I'm full on Zen mode. So, Austin, we have calls, we have stuff. Take over. You are now in charge.
Well, we've got let's see here. Let's talk to Cole here. Cole from Florida, who is a theist. And Cole, you're on the air with Matt and Austin. What do you have for us today on this beautiful Sabbath day?
Hello, Matt and Austin. It's good to be here with you. I'm calling with the assertion that just as we have natural desires that have corresponding fulfillments, natural fulfillments, like if we feel hunger, food satiates that craving. If we need to breathe, the access to air alleviates like the pangs of choking. So also, all of us have a desire to be satiated in general, to be satisfied. And ultimately, satisfaction can only be attained through perceiving no deficiencies. And that could only be done if there is an infinite correspondent to that desire, which must be God.
Okay, great. I understand. I think I understand what you're trying to say here, Cole. You're saying that there are natural desires. I feel hunger. There is food to satiate the hunger. There's a natural, corollary to this emotion that I'm feeling, and there's a thing that is provided to satiate that feeling. And ultimately, what you're saying is there is a very human desire to be satisfied, for life to have some kind of purpose, some kind of ultimate design, some kind of meaning, and the only thing that offers infinite satisfaction is God. I would personally argue that you are presupposing that the answers or explanation offered by your version of God, which I'm sure is a very specific one, are satisfying for all people. And I would immediately disagree with you. And I would also say that, I was raised in a religion that told me that there is only one way to receive satisfaction for that kind of yearning, for that kind of desire to be fulfilled in that way. And I was told that the only way to actually have that desire fulfilled was to be an adherent to this specific ideology, this specific religion, not just any religion, but this specific one. It was Mormonism, by the way. And I was dumbfounded. One of the main reasons why I remain an atheist today, 20 years after leaving the church, is I was dumbfounded to find out that I was able to find the exact same level and greater levels of satisfaction outside of that religion than I was inside of it. So, is there a reason why you believe? Do you have some kind of substantive argument to offer as to why your specific version of the God story offers a definitive satisfaction to all people? Is there anything that you can point to?
So I am a bit of a perennialist. As I said in the screen call, I'm a Manichaean. So I do believe in the message of Maimonides, who was a bit of a religious syncretist, believing that Buddha, Zoroaster, and Jesus all were from God and spoke truth. And so I believe that ultimately there's like a perennial truth in most theistic religions. I'll hesitate from saying all, but in most theistic religions, and that is, there's this idea that we come from a divine source, and that we therefore naturally carry with us a yearning to return to that divine source, and that manifests itself in the desire for satisfaction or restlessness. And St. Augustine, who had been a Manichaean, most famously said, "Thou hast made us for thyself, and our hearts are restless till they rest in thee."
I have
Okay.
a question.
I'm interested in your thoughts, Matt.
So, first of all, satisfaction is ill-defined. Hunger is pretty well understood. I know what it feels like to be hungry. I don't necessarily know that I desire satisfaction, but you said a number of different things, and you said that satisfaction is only possible with an infinite correspondent. Why is it that hunger and breathing can be satisfied without it being infinite, but you claim that satisfaction, which is ill-defined, requires an infinite correspondent, when we have no reason to believe that the existence of an urge necessarily means there is any way to fulfill that urge? Like, for example, if I'm the last human being alive and I have an urge to have sex with another human being, there's no way to satisfy that. So you need to prove that the desire for something is sufficient to demonstrate that the fulfillment of that desire is possible. Then you have to show that the specific fulfillment of desire that you're advocating for is not only possible but probable, and that it can satisfy. Because I don't have a desire for a God, and I have yet to come across any God concept that, even if it were real, adequately fills some desire that I have.
So, okay, good points. Let me address them, if I may. So when it comes to your example, for instance, of a human being who's like the last human being on Earth that has a desire to have their sexual appetite gratified, which would have been possible if there were still people on Earth, that urge, as it were, is like a, what we would call like a antique. It is present from a time when it did have a fulfillment. Therefore, it originally did.
Yes, I understand that potential problem, but this is also true for a lot of people. Despite the fact that there are many people here, they can't seem to find anyone to satisfy their sexual urges at all, even in a world with billions of people. So are you saying that there's somebody out there for everyone right now and they just haven't found them?
Oh, like a soulmate or Bashert? Well, I won't necessarily say that, but
is there someone?
When it comes
is there someone out there for everybody to fulfill their sexual desires with?
So you and I both know, Matt, that Manichaeism does exalt the idea of celibacy. So people who have those urges and yet are called to celibacy obviously do not have them.
That's not only not an answer to the question that I asked. I'm not convinced it's even relevant to the problem issue because I didn't ask you about Manichaeism or anything related to that. So let's get to the next point, which was, if I'm hungry, do I need infinite food to satisfy that? The answer is no. So why is it that you come up with this ambiguous concept of satisfaction and then assert that only an infinite source can assuage that desire for satisfaction? What does satisfaction mean in this context?
So hunger and thirst, the examples again, have something in common, that they create a restlessness. They, generally speaking, impel us or move us to try to alleviate that discomfort from lacking these things. So I would say that if you took the example of restlessness, which we all experience from discontentment, we have a yearning to be satisfied. And so all of these things point to the ultimate yearning for satisfaction in general.
Maybe I'm just terrible at asking the questions, since you seem to be completely incapable of answering them. Hunger is a physical need that specifically is seeking the fuel that we need to sustain ourselves. The same thing is true for breathing. You have not demonstrated any satisfaction or need for satisfaction at all for a God or anything that any God could provide that rises remotely to that level.
So why do you think these physical urges for satisfaction are more important or necessary than like psychological urges for satisfaction?
Because you'll die without them. He's talking about the level. You'll die without air. You'll die without food. You won't die without a belief in God or without an adherence to some kind of theology. They are different levels of severity in terms of physical need. Is that correct, Matt? Or is that what you're getting at, right?
Yeah, although I'm confused as to why I keep asking questions, and instead of answering the questions, you instead decided in this case to just ask a different question. What does satisfaction mean in this context?
I would say satisfaction means contentment or stillness, having no further urge.
Okay, what's the demonstration that that is attainable?
Because it itself is so all of these other particulars we were pointing to about hunger, etc., they have a satisfaction, a correspondent that grants at least momentary satisfaction, and we have a desire to experience that state. So I would say they likely point to...
Your argument is logically flawed, and it is not in itself demonstration of anything other than you can make a flawed argument. The existence of a desire does not in any way demonstrate that there is necessarily a capability to fulfill that desire. And so with hunger and breathing, a desire to get oxygen and food, we can both demonstrate this physically and show that the need arises because of how our bodies work, and show that there are ways, in fact, to fulfill it. We do this every single day. There are psychological needs that may or may not be fulfilled and may not even have a correlate to hope to fulfill them. You are making an argument by analogy. And then whenever we point out the problems with it, you just go to ask another question. I have no need of a God that I can tell. And you can't come up with anything so far other than we all seek contentment, and an infinite God is the only being that can get us to that. Well, A, I'm not convinced that we all seek contentment in the same way. B, I'm not convinced that only a God can do it. C, I'm not convinced that there is a God that can do it at all. So you still have all of your work in front of you. The fact that there's a desire for something does not mean necessarily there is something that can meet that desire. So tell us, what desire do I have that can only be fulfilled by a God? And how do you know that there is a God who can fulfill that?
So I know you'll say the burden of proof is on me, but when you said, for instance, that the example of the person who had the desire for a mate, but there was no other human being on earth, I have yet to see or perceive that there's any desire that we have naturally that does not have at least the potential for fulfillment.
So I'm sorry, but this is also completely
Can you prove
logically
that such a
fallacious.
desire
This is also completely logically fallacious. And it's not an answer to my question. My question was very specific. What need do I have that can only be fulfilled by a God? And what's the demonstration that a God exists who can fulfill it? That's it. Start with what need I have.
You have a desire to be happy. As Pascal said, all people desire to be happy, even those who hang themselves.
Cool. I don't need you to quote people or reference people. There's fewer things that will have any impact on me than someone saying, like so-and-so says, because that's an appeal to authority.
Appeal for authority,
that's appeal to authority, which is as fallacious as all the other stuff. And you already knew it, which is why you jumped in there. I ask you, what need do I have? And you say, I have a need to be happy. What does that mean? And how do you know I need to be happy? And how do you know that my happy need can only be fulfilled by God?
So why does a human being do anything?
Cole, I promise you, no matter how much you try, you are not going to get me out of Zen mode, even if you ridiculously try to respond.
I don't want to get you out of
Zen. I'm sorry. Even if you keep fucking interrupting me and ridiculously try to respond to every question I ask with your own question, you will be impressing no one, and you will be an absolute failure at defending your beliefs. So let's try this again. What does it mean to say that Matt needs to be happy and only a God can fill that need?
It means that experience of life, if there is no way to attain a lasting satisfaction, is just suffering. It's pain, because our desires, like hunger,
I am now officially done with Cole. That doesn't mean that Cole is done with the show. I'm going to back out of this because it's clear that Cole and I are never going to have a productive conversation, at least not today. And I want to see if Austin can, because I have failed.
Yeah. Well, I will say that this to me is not fulfilling my challenge of the day. I think everything about your argument it requires a lot of presupposition and apologetics. You are presupposing that every person alive experiences desires for contentment in the same way, and you are presupposing that there is only one solution and that it is an infinite God, and you have no way of demonstrating any of that. And as Matt has pointed out, that your burden then is to be able to demonstrate that empirically with some kind of data. You also said earlier, and I just want to pose this to you, you said, I can't think of a natural need that does not have a way for it to be fulfilled. And I was like, or things that arise that people desire, a desire that does not have a way to be fulfilled. And I immediately was like, what human has not desired to be able to fly, or to be able to turn themselves invisible, or to have the ability to teleport themselves from one location to another? What human has not had, the desire to be able to, transport their consciousness into a new state of understanding or enlightenment instantaneously, and bypass the oftentimes difficult process of pain that accompanies learning and things like that. There are all kinds of desires that humans experience that don't have a natural way of being fulfilled. And if your answer is going to be, I can be invisible or teleport or fly with the aid of some kind of God, again, I'm going to need you to be able to demonstrate that in some form. So is there any way for you to demonstrate these claims that all people experience these desires in the same way, that we all yearn for the same things, and that there is definitively, objectively, some way to know that your version of an infinite God conscience is the end-all be-all solution to that yearning?
Well, first off, I wouldn't necessarily say because we all have within ourselves different things, like we all have different possessions. So I wouldn't say we all necessarily yearn in the same way. I would say we all have a genuine yearning for the good or completeness. But since we lack different things, it's not necessarily in the same way. And when it comes to like flying or the desire to be invisible, yes, I grant that I cannot turn invisible. And although I may believe God could let me do so, I think that would be a ridiculous argument. But I would say we have been given the means, for instance, to create technology that lets us fly or completes those desires. And that's kind of like an entelechy, or like an idea that's buried within us that we have been given the means to create the fulfillment to through science, which I do see value in.
Well, now you're just making an argument for, what exists in technology and science, and just saying that there are ways for us to fulfill certain needs in other ways to circumvent the natural inhibitions that we are, or natural roadblocks or obstacles that stand in our way. And that's, I don't see how this connects to the overall argument that you were making. I think that the answer, Cole, is that you don't have an answer. I don't think you have a way of demonstrating that all people experience the same desires in the same way, and that there is one, overarching solution for all of that.
And this is
Matt.
This is just a pointless nitpick that some people are going to think is mean. It's not pronounced intellecty. It's intellecty.
I don't think it's mean at all. I appreciate the grammatical correction.
Cool. Now, do you also appreciate the logical corrections, pointing out the fallacies in your argument? And if so, why is it that when we keep asking questions, would you agree that the mere presence of a desire alone is not sufficient to conclude that there is in fact a way to fulfill that desire?
Experience suggests otherwise to me, but I grant that we are not going to be able to resolve this productively today.
So your answer to my question is no, you would not agree with that. And your reason for not agreeing it is your personal experience and what you are personally incredulous about. Well, I'm sorry, but that's also a fallacious line of reasoning that will carry zero weight. The fact is, the mere presence of a desire in and of itself in no way guarantees that that desire is caused by or can be fulfilled by something else. If I have a burning desire to be the master and ruler of the world, that does not mean that there is a way to satisfy that or that that desire is good. There are plenty of people who have desires that are incredibly problematic, including sexual desires that cause them to assault other people, desires for power that can only be fulfilled by diminishing other people, by taking away their rights. The fact that there is a desire doesn't tell you whether that desire is good or not, does not tell you whether that desire is a true fundamental need to the survival or thriving of that individual or a species, and in no way tells you whether or not there is something that can satisfy that. Your entire argument is, I really want there to be a God, which means it's reasonable to believe that there is a God who wants me to want him. Well, while that can make for good song lyrics, I want you to want me, it is absolutely shit when it comes to arguing for the existence of God. You've got to come with something stronger.
Do you believe
Ultimately,
that we
Cole,
partake in a universal humanity? Like, is that there are universals? Sorry.
I don't know that there's like some
I
sort of
didn't hear the
universal
question.
morality, that there's some, he said, do you believe that we exist in a universal humanity, that there are universals, that there's some kind of universal truth? As far as the observable universe that we live in, I guess, you know, the laws of physics in many cases seem pretty consistent, but I wouldn't ever definitively say that there's some kind of universal objective morality or universal objective philosophical truth. I just know what's been demonstrated and what hasn't. And yeah.
I would agree that there are some universals, but that doesn't mean that everything is universal. So, for example, all humans, until demonstrated otherwise, need oxygen. But not all humans need to be right and be proven right. Not all humans need sexual pleasure. Not all humans need any number of things. So you cannot argue from one specific to the broad general and then back to specifics and say, because we need food and there's a satisfier in food, therefore we have other needs and those must also be able to be satisfied. The fact that you desire a God is completely irrelevant to whether or not there is a God that can fill that desire. And the fact that you keep arguing for that on the basis of what you are personally incredulous about, do you have anything other than your suspicions about desires to back up your claim that a God exists?
Well, I could argue from teleology or design, which I'm sure you've hashed that sort of argument many times.
Yeah.
I believe that there's order in the universe and that order suggests a designer.
Why?
I don't think order can come out of pure disorder.
Oh, so once again, so here we are again, Cole. You don't think order can come out of pure disorder. So you're setting up a straw man, which isn't what is actually the scientific position for this, but you're setting up a straw man, and then you say that order suggests there's an intelligent designer, when in fact it does not. The mere presence of order, despite your inability to conceive of it and your suspicions to the contrary, is not sufficient. We recognize design by contrasting it with that which occurs naturally, that which is undesigned. You don't then get to go to nature and say that because there's order, there must have been a designer. That's simply false, because a sand dune has order. And it is order that arises out of the mass of the objects, the gravity of the planet it's on, and the wind and the weather conditions that form things. The same is true for how trees and plants go. There's order there. There's mathematical order. There's beauty. But it is all about efficiency. When you look at a sunflower and you look at the spiraling seeds in the center, they map to 1.618809933, etc., the golden ratio and other things. You can find these in all of them. But that's not because there's magic or intent. It's because that is what the math dictates as the most efficient way to pack that circle. And the truth is, nature is lazy and opts for the most efficient path. When water's running down a hill, it doesn't form the creek that God intended. It meanders down the hill, taking out the smaller, weaker fragments and creating a groove that it then builds by its own mass. To look at a particularly beautiful creek and suggest that it's just so pretty and so convenient that it must have been hand carved and designed by a God is absurd. And yet that's exactly what you're doing with any teleological argument for the universe.
So I do believe in evolution and seminal raisins and stuff like that. So I think, obviously, I agree with you that nature selects for what is efficient. But I'm curious why there should be this desire or this in nature to thrive or reproduce etc. at all, why do you think that is without there being a designer or someone who implants that desire to survive or be efficient in nature?
So now we've moved on from you making assertions because you are incapable of coming up with an explanation other than a designer, to asking me what explanation I would come up with other than a designer. Cool. Let's assume that neither myself nor anybody else has any idea how this could happen without a designer. Is that sufficient to conclude that there was a designer?
It seems probable.
That's not what I asked. And it's frustrating that you keep avoiding the answers to the question that I asked. Whether or not it seems probable is independent from whether or not it is in fact probable. But the fact alone that you can't come up with a reason or I can't come up with a reason does not in any way demonstrate sufficient justification to conclude there is a designer. That's simply irrational. And so this is why I object when, instead of answering my question, you decided that you would ask me to do your homework for you. Okay. I don't have to have an explanation for any perceived order or your confusion about it or what suspicions you're making at all. And the fact that I may not have an answer and maybe nobody has an answer does not in the slightest demonstrate that the right answer is or ever could be viewed as God did it.
Well, and I just want to say, not only is it insufficient, the idea that maybe no one has an explanation, that means there's a designer. But even if the answer is there's a designer, that designer is this infinitely, that you know who that designer is, you understand that designer's heart and mind, you have a specific story about that designer that you think is correct, everything that flows out from that conclusion, which already is a fallacious conclusion to that question, you then extrapolate all of this extra information about who specifically that designer is, the gender of that designer, the intent of that designer, the capabilities of that designer. And there's so much more that just gets piled on top of something that foundationally you have no reason to conclude. Does that make sense, Cole?
I would grant that most religious systems add a bunch of superfluous stuff that expresses more or less a religious culture rather than necessarily absolute religious truth.
But not you, right, Cole?
Well, like I said, I consider myself somewhat of a perennialist as a Manichaean, believing that
that's
Buddha,
the right one, right?
etc.
And that's the right one, right? You're the right one. You got it right.
I mean, I won't say that every single practice has to be observed or is wise or true. For instance,
Cole,
at one
do
time,
you think that your version, Cole, do you think that your version of theism is correct?
I think it is the best.
There we go.
Ooh, what's
or I wouldn't believe it, would I?
Right,
I
exactly.
think mine's the best.
Exactly.
I think mine is demonstrably the best because my position does not in any way accept a claim until it is warranted by sound logical arguments.
That's mine too.
Well, I mean, we talked about probability. I think it is sound to act on probability.
I'll give you $1,000. I'll give you $1,000 right now if you can calculate the probability of God.
It's a very kind offer.
You can't do it, Cole. And this is why I love to expose this line of thinking, because you use the word probability because it has more gravitas, and it should, than possibility. But what's funny is you can't even demonstrate possibility, let alone calculate probability, and you want to pretend as if you are advocating for a reasoned position based on probability. But for you, in this context, as we've shown at least twice, and I think 3 times, what you mean by probability is just, I can't think of anything better. This feels most likely based on my suspicions. I'm sorry, Cole, but your suspicions does not probability make, and you have to do better.
All right, I'll try to do better next time. I appreciate your gracefulness and talking with me, and thank you.
Hey, thanks for calling in, Cole. Nice chatting with you. Yeah, I'll just say, really quick here too, that it's funny that Cole, I don't know if he's still on the line, but didn't realize
I am.
that. Okay, you're still here. Cool, great. I just want to say something really quick before we go, that you said, yeah, I know a lot of religions add in a lot of superfluous stuff, a lot of superfluous story. And my point was, all of these different sects, all of these different religions are convinced that they have the best version of the God story, of the idea of who this designer is. So you're saying, well, I don't believe that order can come out of chaos. It must necessitate a designer. I don't believe that there can be desires that people have, like the desire to be fulfilled, without something existing to satiate that desire. And I believe that thing must be God. And what I'm saying is, okay, let's go with your presupposition and presuppose that it is God. Why would it be your specific version of God? And why would it be your specific story? And you agree, oh yeah, all these different religions, they put on all this extra stuff. And then I go, but not you, right? Yours is right. And then you go, well, yeah, I do believe that mine's right. Why? How can you see the absurdity of the other groups, but you think, but mine is actually special and good? How can you not see that you're doing the exact same thing as all of these other people who you agree are silly?
Can I
So
before
yes,
Cole
absolutely.
actually answers? It's because Cole fancies himself a perennialist, and much the same way that the obnoxious online self-professed agnostics think they are somehow superior to both theists and atheists, which is an absurd position, as almost as absurd as you can get. Because he's a perennialist, he thinks he has melded together the best aspects of a variety of different religious claims, such that he's more probably arrived at a core truth, because they couldn't all be wrong. And so they must have, or likely have, all touched upon some sort of truth somewhere. And so he's the one that's going through and saying, maybe this amalgamation of wildly disparate claims, once I remove the things that are obviously false and falsifiable, must be most accurate to the truth, which is simply fallacious again. But I might be wrong.
Did he nail it, Cole? He nailed it, didn't he?
Well, there are aspects of accuracy in what he said. Matt's a pretty bright fellow. But I will say that what I was going to say is I'm a big believer in universals. I consider myself more or less Platonic in my philosophy. I believe in universal human experiences and truths, and I think a lot of ritual is meant to reflect or inculcate those truths in in story form or in a intuitive form rather than a strictly rational form, like a strictly reason form.
Can rituals reinforce falsehoods as well?
Absolutely.
So how do you tell the difference between a ritual that reinforces and inculcates a falsehood versus one that does a truth?
Well, like I said with Manny, who believed in universals and truths in different religions, you try to find the common strands.
No.
The common experiences.
I'm asking about a method for identifying the truth. Is it possible that there are common strands in claims that ultimately are not tied to a true proposition?
Remotely.
It's funny how every time I point out the flaw in your thinking, it's a begrudging, half-assed acknowledgement of something that is simply true or false.
I wonder if I can get you to acknowledge something too, Cole, since you do seem to be willing to at least begrudgingly offer these sort of concessions. I think earlier you said, from personal experience is how you seem to come to the assertion that the thing that can fulfill this desire for satisfaction is some kind of infinite God consciousness. And I want to say here to you on the phone that I'm not here to deny that you personally have found some kind of contentment or fulfillment from a God story, whatever story it is that you adhere to. This perennialist version that is sort of an amalgamation of lots of different God stories that you've sort of Frankenstein together your own version that seems to be have a core truth to you. I'm not denying that you've been able to find some kind of satisfaction in that. What I want to ask is, do you believe it's possible that people like myself and Matt have also found contentment and satisfaction in rejecting claims that have no evidential basis and embracing a worldview that requires evidence before we accept an assertion, and just going through the world as just people who say there are knowns and there are unknowns, and I do not make truth claims about the unknowns. I do my best to be a good person. I do my best to help people in need. I do my best to be of service where I can. I do my best to be a good friend and a good sibling and a good son and a. Do you believe that it's possible for us to find contentment without adhering to your process?
So let me preface my answer by saying that I don't want to seem offensive, and I have the utmost respect for you, because obviously it's going to sound condescending or whatever and rude when I say that, no, I do not believe that you can find, I think you can find momentary feelings of contentment. For instance, I think you can find maybe a sort of intellectual satisfaction when you believe you've dismissed with an argument. But I don't believe you can find like meaningful, what we might call that, like Zen, like tranquility.
Yeah, I really wish you had just answered the question instead of trying to do the I'm not trying to sound insulting, because I genuinely couldn't possibly give a fuck if you were trying to actually be insulting or not. Because what you don't seem to understand is that your answer, which is, well, I think you can be kind of satisfied, but not real satisfied, is just an assertion that you know and understand something that we don't, which would be much more impressive if you could even come close to giving a hint of a demonstration that this is at all true. Until then, it's just like saying, I have a peace that passes understanding. Okay, then how do you understand it? Well, I have a satisfaction that you don't know that only comes from God. Well, cool. What good does it do anybody for you to come in and smugly assert that your life is better because of God than we could ever know, when you can't demonstrate that it is better? You can't demonstrate that it's better because of God. This is a level of smug sophistry that we rarely rise to. So whether you're trying, I mean, you can't offend me. You can only make me realize how bad this is, because you have failed to present a case for anything you believe. And now when push comes to shove, you're sit here forced to acknowledge that, yes, you think you have discovered a contentment that we will never find without a God. And to that, I'm like,
Yeah.
congratulations.
You're also putting yourself in this really precarious situation where, by claiming that we are only capable of finding moments of clarity, moments of contentment, moments of perceived happiness, but you are capable of finding true, lasting, meaningful, substantive contentment. It's like, that's the claim you're making. So what you're saying, Cole, is that currently where you are in Florida, you exist on a day-to-day basis with nonstop, everlasting, full contentment. You are fully satiated by your perennialist God story, and that satiation never leaves for a moment. You never feel lost. You never feel sad. You never feel confused, anxious. You never feel like maybe you've got it wrong. You never have moments of doubt. Is that true, Cole? Is that what you're claiming?
So what we're hitting on is Manichaeism is a Gnostic tradition.
Just answer the question. Just answer the question.
Is that
it's incredibly frustrating. I'm
trying to give you as blunt answers as I can.
Cole, I'm actually talking right now, so you can just pause and think about your answer and maybe listen, because Cole's obnoxious in that he loves to to say words that he's fairly confident only 2 or 3 of us actually listening will know anything about, like entelechy or Manichaeism or perennialism, or let me put labels on things. And Cole puts labels on things because that gives him a shorthand of looking like he's accomplished something when he cannot actually explain any of the things that he's advocating for. So
I would just,
when you are content,
yeah.
What does your God do for you apart from giving you contentment, Cole? Does your God make you satisfied that you've had a good day when you come on and embarrass yourself like this?
And again, is that satisfaction ever, is it, because what your claim is that we are only capable of having momentary satisfaction, momentary fulfillment, but that we have other moments where we are not satisfied and not fulfilled. So I'm saying, do you go through life with nonstop contentment and fulfillment? It's a yes or no question. You can answer the question yes or no, I am always contented and always satisfied, or no, sometimes I am not.
No, sometimes I am not.
There we go. Then your mode of finding satisfaction in life has been proven to be substantively no different than mine and Matt's. There you go.
Well, I feel like you want to streamline the arguments to yes or no when sometimes there's nuance.
Because it is a yes or no question.
I'm trying to answer as straight and honestly as I can.
See, here's the problem, Cole, is that we specifically asked questions that are yes or no. And when I ask a yes or no question, it needs to be answered with yes, no, or I don't know, and then we can further expand it. But are you constantly happy? Are you constantly content? Is a yes or no question. There's no fucking nuance. It is a question about an absolute. And even if you're only 99.999%, then the answer is no. And so then the follow-up, see, you think that when we ask a yes or no question, this is a gotcha and we're done. No, it's not. The yes or no questions are designed to further the conversation because you are incapable of furthering the conversation. When we asked you to explain stuff, you failed. So now we have to ask yes or no questions so that we can get an answer so that we can move forward. So when you say you're not always content, we can say, what percentage more content every day do you think you are than we are? That's not a yes or no question. That's an attempt to quantify. And you don't have to give a number, but you could say way more, a little more, not at all more.
Is there a percent
more? Do you want
Cole,
me to answer that question?
Oh, I'd love
Sure.
it.
Okay. So 100% more.
Okay.
Which is going to seem like a contradiction to my previous answer.
Which means, so for example, if I'm content 80% of the time, then that means you're content 160% of the time, right? Whoops. As soon as you got Cole where you didn't have to do math, you failed to think about the math and decided to immediately go into hyperbole. So if I'm 2%, if I'm only content 2% of the time, and you're 100% more content with that, you're then content 102%. See, okay. This is why I'm so opposed to hyperbole. And I pointed out that you didn't even have to give a number, because I knew that if you gave a number, it would be absolutely trivially. I'm playing chess right now and winning on another machine because I don't even have to think about what you say. It is an absolute train wreck.
Cole, I think we've spent enough time on this. I'm done if Matt is. Interesting call, Cole. Thanks for going back and forth with us for so long. I'd encourage you to think about what we talked about here today. You were not able to demonstrate any of the claims you made or give any evidence for any of the claims you made in any way. All you did this entire call was just said, people have needs. My version of the God story is the solution to those needs. We said, can you prove that? Can you demonstrate why? You are not able to. You went into an intelligent design argument of, well, I believe that I can go into other things, that why would there be order out of chaos? We demonstrated that there are many reasons why there would be order out of chaos, and also demonstrated that not knowing is not a sufficient answer for God, and asked if you could provide one. You are not able to. Matt, final thoughts with Cole.
I'm just wondering, Cole, which of the two of us, me or you, do you think should be more content with how this call went?
It should be me.
Well, there we go.
All right, great. Amazing, Cole. I'm glad you are satisfied with the call. Okie dokie. Yeah. Interesting.
I love how you can be like, I'm 100% more content with you. And the question that I didn't ask, which I wanted to ask, how do you know how content I am?
Right.
Like,
yeah,
I
exactly.
don't know how content Cole is, which is why I had to ask. And when Cole, who doesn't know how content I am, says that he's 100% more content than I am. Oh, well, is it if I'm 10% content, are you 110% content? Or if I'm 10% content, are you just 20% content? See, I did both of those because I started with if I'm 80% content, 100% boost is 160. And then I also just did the additive because Cole is making hyperbolic claims based on things he cannot know and cannot quantify and seems comfortable. Oh, I'm sorry, content to do so.
I just did an episode of my podcast called Cults of Deception, and talking about, there's cults of personality and cults of delusion, but I think that ultimately all of these things, and it boils down to theology, they're cults of deception that require you to be just so regularly used to dishonesty that you also engage in a form of self-deception. And that's what we ultimately got to, is being able to show that, when you pin someone like that down to a corner and say, can you definitively speak authoritatively about my level of contentment? Rather than being able to admit, no, I cannot. There's no way for me to know which one of us is more contented, which is the honest answer. His ideology forces him to just lie, and to embarrassingly lie, to just say, yes, Austin and Matt, I know exactly what level of contentment you live with on a day-to-day basis, and I can say authoritatively that I live with 100% more contentment than you. And then in a call where he was embarrassed and we said, do you feel satisfied with this call? Which of course he doesn't. He's forced to say, yes, I do, because that's what that ideology demands of him pretty much with every breath that leaves his body, is I cannot engage with discussions in good faith and honestly. I have to be a liar and tell lies that are silly, embarrassing, obvious lies.
It's really wild. And granted, I've done this for 20 years, and yes, I've heard most all there is, which is why I'm able to kind of pick stuff out. But don't get me wrong, I like the fact that Cole listens and makes an attempt, but I genuinely, I think the summary that I gave a minute ago is about as accurate as I can get. There are smug, overly confident online agnostics that are like, I'm not a theist, I'm not an atheist, as if that's an option to be neither. It's not. But also who think they're better because atheists are just as bad as theists. I've heard, all kinds of people saying this. And all they're demonstrating is that they don't understand the subject, and yet they are incredibly confident in their smug superiority. The same thing happens when you get to these perennialists and others who are like, oh, all religions must be tapping into something that's true. There's no way that all of these cultures around the world could come up with similar stories unless there's something true there. And the thing that every single one of them seems to fail to recognize or to dismiss without justification is that human beings are similar beings addressing similar questions, trying to solve similar problems, and we are going to come up with similar solutions. Why is there something rather than nothing? I don't know. Must be that's the way somebody wanted it, somebody especially powerful. And so it's funny because he started off with this, all humans have hunger, all humans breathe, all humans desire satisfaction. Well, why not all humans make stuff up? All humans buy into things that aren't true. all humans are incredibly dissatisfied with saying, I don't know. And all humans are even more dissatisfied with living in the state of unknown and uncertainty. And therefore, it's most reasonable that these weak-minded, fragile, terrified beings facing a universe of questions and being ill-equipped to answer all of them right now would buy into comforting assertions and delusions in order to avoid feeling terrified.
Absolutely. We've got another call here that maybe now that it's nice and even. We're turning the corner into a new hour. We've got Timmy, a theist who claims to be from China, but our call-in studio says North Bergen, New Jersey, so I'm not sure which one it is. But Timmy says that the worldview that leads to atheism is contradictory. Timmy, you are on the air with Matt and Austin. What do you mean the world that leads to atheism is contradictory?
Hey, guys. Hey, Matt. Hey, Austin. Yeah, I am calling from China. I'm American.
Right,
I have to use a VPN in order to be on YouTube. It's really nice to meet you guys.
Hello.
Yeah, I do. Can you hear me?
Hey, Timmy? Yeah,
we can.
I have a quick question because I definitely want, it's the same question that Austin just asked, which is, you say this worldview that leads to atheism. Real quick, what do you think specifically led to my becoming an atheist?
Right. Well, I think all of us have worldviews that ultimately lead to our beliefs, or in other words, our assumptions about reality that lead to our beliefs. And so, I'm not necessarily sure what.
Timmy?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. I asked a very specific question. I'm going to try and repeat this. What do you think
led to
my what do you think led to my becoming an atheist?
I think your assumptions in the same way I think my assumptions.
Okay. What assumption led to my becoming an atheist?
Your ontological and epistemological assumptions. Your perception of reality.
Being specifically what?
What you assume reality to be.
And what do we assume reality to be? What are those assumptions specifically?
In this case, not theistic.
No. I'm sorry, Timmy. I asked, so are you aware that I'm a former Christian?
I wasn't aware of that. No, but I believe that I do believe atheism.
Timmy.
Okay.
Here, Timmy. Let me.
I'd like to answer. That's okay.
Well, I'd like for you to answer too, but I think it's incredibly ironic that you're calling in to talk about our assumptions when you've made assumptions about us and you don't know who the fuck you're talking to. So, I was a fundamentalist Southern Baptist Christian. I walked down the aisle at the age of 5 and accepted Jesus into my heart and was active in the church until I was 30 something and was studying with the intent of becoming a pastor. I did not have an assumption that the world was theistic when I became a Christian, and I did not have an assumption that the world was not theistic when I became an atheist. What I have is an understanding of how we should best go about demonstrating what is true. And when I found out that my justifications for my former beliefs were flawed, fallacious, unsupported by evidence, I spent years looking for things that would demonstrate that a God exists, specifically the one that I started with, and then branching out to other gods. And what I found after studying philosophical positions is that I needed to find out what kind of God might exist that we could demonstrate. And I came up wanting. I didn't make any assumptions other than I'm not able to accept things until there is a valid and sound argument, preferably supported by evidence for those, but I'm not going to accept fallacious positions. So since you're calling in to speculate about my assumptions, it might be nice if you knew that you were already wrong in what you said my assumptions were.
I'm sorry, do you want to listen to me?
It's very clear that you didn't just listen to anything he just said.
Timmy,
you were just waiting. You were just waiting for.
Is Timmy just going to whine and cry for the rest of the time he's on?
I love that when you can tell a person didn't listen at all.
Yeah, we wanted you to call in to justify your theism. It's already dubious when you're calling in from a web client. And when you admit that you don't know who I am or what my story is, and then make assertions about what my assumptions were, which are in fact false, and I call you out on it,
No.
which are in fact false, and when I call you out on it, instead of acknowledging that or trying to move on or trying to rehabilitate, instead you decide to whine about whether or not I want to listen to you. And so, no, the answer now,
Okay.
Timmy, is no. In fact, I don't want to listen to you, but Austin might.
Alrighty.
So have fun.
Okay. All right. Usually, as far as a debate or a good conversation is concerned, I try not to interrupt people, and I try to
Oh,
refrain
I'm
from
sorry.
using
good for
I'm
you.
sorry, Timmy.
I forgot that.
Go ahead, interrupt
We
me.
called
Timmy,
into
It's okay.
we called into
sorry,
Timmy's
Timmy.
show.
I'm so sorry, Timmy, but this is not a debate. This is you calling in to defend something, and we will interrupt as much as necessary for clarity for the audience. If you want to have your own show, you can go make your own show. And if you would like to do a debate, that's what I do for a living, and I would be happy to debate you. All you have to do is schedule that. But that's not how the show works. And if you knew anything about us or the show before you decided to call in and show your ass, you would have known that. So try starting over.
I'm sorry, I'm not famous. I
Oh, I'm
apologize.
sorry. hang on. I'm going to mute Timmy for a second. I'm sorry you're not famous too, Timmy. I genuinely wish you were famous, because then rather than just calling in anonymously through a web client and making claims that you couldn't back up, you would actually have some skin in the game. I'm here under my real name and have been for 20 years. This is my job, one of several jobs. And by the way, still not famous, but I wish you were famous, because then it might put you in a position where instead of just whining about how you're not famous, you could actually get to a demonstration that we're somehow wrong and have made a mistake in becoming atheists. Let's back up. I'm going to take a step back here, and I'm going to unmute Timmy in just a second, because I wasn't supposed to go near the mute button today. Timmy feels like someone who actually does know who I am and has decided to try to piss me off, and it's not going to work at all. So, Timmy, I'm going to unmute you right now, and I'd like to say, Timmy, welcome to the show. Austin's here to talk to you about what assumptions we might have made, or what flaw we made in our reasoning that led to us becoming atheists or atheism in general. Timmy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I don't mean that you guys made any flaw in your assumptions that led to atheism. What I mean is just like you said earlier, Matt, all of us don't know, and we're all dealing with a world of, or a life of uncertainty, and we're all humans. I also acknowledge that I make assumptions that lead to my beliefs in theism. So I just wanted to say that I do believe, and I hope if I'm wrong, you'll be able to show me that I'm wrong, that the assumptions that lead to atheism are self-contradictory. And if I'm wrong, please show me. I'm genuinely curious. That's why I called in. And it is a pleasure to speak with you guys. I hope that that you won't interrupt me while I'm communicating. I also won't interrupt you, and I do respect your show. So thanks again.
All right, great. What assumptions, Timmy, have we made? And you know what all Matt was trying to do is show you that you don't actually know anything about what assumptions we made or didn't make. We've already demonstrated that, but just for the sake of here we are doing our show and giving you the floor and giving you the chance to speak, you think that there are assumptions that we make that are self-contradictory. What specifically are those assumptions, and why are they self-contradictory? We will let you know whether or not we have indeed actually made those assumptions, and we will let you know our thoughts on whether or not we believe they are actually indeed contradictory. But you take it away, Timmy. Tell us what those assumptions are and how they are contradictory.
Thank you. So we all make assumptions about what reality is. We have to. We also assume that we can trust our senses, and we all have to. Just as Matt mentioned earlier, we're all living in a world of uncertainty with things that we don't know. So these are the assumptions that I mentioned, and I'd like to ask whether you guys disagree with me in that.
Sorry, if the assumption that we live in a world where there are things we don't know? That's not an assumption.
The assumption
that's
of what reality is.
That's not an assumption. That's just a fact. That's
let me jump in for clarity here, and that is, Yes. As a practical necessity, we assume that reason is reliable, even though we cannot demonstrate that it is in fact inviolate. And we assume that because we don't have a solution to the problem of hard solipsism, that we in fact live in and share a reality. Those are both practical assumptions that we make out of necessity,
Right.
and it's no different whether you're a theist or not. Those assumptions, by the way, have nothing to do with atheism. I bet you can't even define atheism because it is not the assertion that there are no gods. It is the rejection of the claim that it is warranted to believe that there's a God.
I'm not sure why you didn't think I knew that. I know it's not a stance or a belief, but I appreciate you acknowledging that we do all make assumptions.
So
I
the
respect that, and
default
I think this is a good faith.
the default position is that nothing is true or believable until such time as it's demonstrated to be believable. So atheism is the default position on the claim that a God exists.
Okay, so this is where I wanted to ask you, because I believe I see a self-contradictory in the atheistic view, and if I'm wrong, again, I do hope that you guys can prove that I'm wrong, but I do believe it to be internally consistent. I know not all atheists. I know there are, of course, many. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I just explained to you what atheism is, and that it is essentially the null hypothesis, and it does not require justification. It is the claim that a God exists that requires justification. And you ignored all of that and went back to tell me about we all have assumptions or whatever else. And so, do you agree? Do you agree that claims, the default position for a claim of existence is to not accept that claim, and that one should only accept that claim once it's been demonstrated to that belief is warranted?
Finished. I'm not trying to be long-winded.
I'm sorry. I'm not interrupting just to do this again. Your phone completely broke up and was a mangled mess, or your web was a mangled mess. So the question I asked was, do you agree that for a claim that X exists, the default position is to not accept that claim until such time as warrant for that claim is demonstrated?
In regards to atheism, yes, I do not disagree.
No, Timmy.
In regards to any claim.
I'm sorry, this is a general foundational question about logic and epistemology. For any claim X exists, the default position should be to not accept the claim is true until such time as warrant has been established for the claim.
This would work, except for
I'm sorry, Timmy. I'm sorry, Timmy, but this is genuinely
feel free
a
to
yes
keep
or no.
interrupting me to prove your point.
I do keep interrupting you, and now I just
you got me. You won.
And I do keep interrupting you, and now I just find it pleasurable because you are dishonestly avoiding answering the obvious question that will demolish your entire argument. So, for the last time, do you agree?
Congratulations.
I'm sorry, I don't know why you're talking. When I'm done, when I say for the last
Because you're
time,
interrupting
that
me.
means it's my fucking show. So when I say for the last time,
you're
that
right.
means I'm getting ready to restate something. I'm getting ready to restate something so that we can find out if you're an honest interlocutor or just a whiny little bitch. So, do you agree?
Oh, yes, good ad hominem fallacy.
You are in fact the whiny little bitch. So, do you agree
that
for any claim?
Timmy, you don't know what an ad hominem is?
Yeah. Yeah,
you're right. I don't.
It is an ad hominem, but an ad hominem fallacy is only when you use it for an argument. An ad hominem is just, I'm addressing your character. I will call you all kinds of names if I need to, and I think they're warranted. And I'm pretty sure that I can demonstrate with evidence. I can demonstrate with evidence from this call more strongly that you are a whiny little bitch than you can that atheism is on fallacious footing. So, do you agree that for any claim X exists, the default position is to not accept the claim until warranted? Yes or no?
Timmy, you were probably talking through all of that, but I had you on mute, so I'm going to unmute you now so you can answer the question. For any claim, just listen up now. You're probably talking through all of that. For any claim that X exists, is it reasonable to accept that claim before evidence is presented that warrants a belief in that claim? That's the yes or no question. You're unmuted now, Timmy.
Right. This is just abuse. I hope you're enjoying
Well, it's
yourself.
our show. It's our show. And what you're upset about, Timmy, is that
Timmy is not sincere.
Yeah,
Timmy is a
the thing that you wanted
who does
to
not have any interest in an honest conversation and just
the
wants to
thing
come in to see if he can trigger me or whine or whatever. It's what a shame this is, Timmy. Timmy.
I
Goodbye.
expected to engage in a good philosophical discussion.
I'm sorry, Timmy. I've offered you a bunch of chances to engage. And
No, I know you need a gotcha. It's okay.
No, I don't need a gotcha.
No, Timmy.
What I need
Timmy,
is
what
somebody who's
happened
actually
is
good at this, and you're not.
what happened, Timmy, is he debunked your whole thing before you even got started, and you got really mad.
No, everyone.
So, like,
in one hand, he said there are ontological and epistemological assumptions, and then on the other hand, he tried to reframe it, saying that there aren't.
Oh no,
Everyone
sir.
knows
You're
that
now.
you have to
Can
assume
we
what
mute
reality
Timmy
is.
so that I can?
And he interrupted me
I'm gonna
several
mute you,
times.
Timmy.
Because, I can interrupt you all day, but one thing that's not going to happen is you're not going to lie. I acknowledge that there are ontological and epistemological assumptions, and I gave the justification for it because I have taught this stuff at a level that you don't grok. I did not then ever change that. I did not state that there were not, or try to imply that there were not. I fully acknowledge that we don't have a solution to the problem of hard solipsism, and that while philosophers occasionally consider senses properly basic, I don't consider them properly basic in the sense of necessarily reliable, but I recognize that pragmatically we are relying on our senses to interact with the world. None of that is relevant at all to my claim, because you asserted that we have a flawed epistemology. And so I tried to see if you agreed with the foundational epistemological claim that for any claim X exists, the default position is to not accept the claim, and that one should accept the claim when there's evidential warrant for that claim. That's a very simple question. It is a straightforward question. It is not attempting in any way to undermine or negate anything that I said previously about assumptions. I also noted that those same assumptions about not being able to solve the problem of hard solipsism and assuming that we interact in a reality and our senses are reliable are universally true as far as we can tell, that you, as you acknowledged, make those same assumptions. We're now beyond the assumption part. I'm sorry that your script has you misdefining atheism and attacking a foundation that you either don't understand or won't honestly engage with, but we've moved beyond we make assumptions, and now we are engaged in when should we actually accept a claim. I asked a simple, straightforward claim, which every single time you could have just said, yes, I agree, no, I don't agree. Instead, you decided to provide more evidence that you're a whiny little dishonest bitch that does not want to actually have this conversation, does not want to demonstrate the truth of your claim, and are just here to provide us engagement and a really good clip of us posering the potsers. But go ahead.
Yeah. Thoughts on that, Timmy? We just unmuted you. It's very clear that you've been talking that entire time, but we just unmuted you after. It's abuse.
Timmy, thank you for the abuse.
So
cool.
Timmy, what happened is
nice to stay on hold for more abuse.
Timmy, we know that what happened is you called in with a very specific script, and it was immediately thrown out because we went, well, if you're going to talk about the assumptions we make, let's be clear about our epistemological foundation. And once we were clarifying the terms, the parameters of the discussion, and it didn't fit your script, you lost your mind and started screaming abuse. So do you have another way into what you wanted to talk about, or was it undone by everything Matt just said?
Can we have a good faith philosophical discussion without
evidently not.
Abusive muting,
is what you're asking? Can you get back on script?
Evidently not.
Is what you're asking? Can you get back on script?
But you strawmanned my argument regarding
you're
atheism,
a liar. You're
and
a
then
fucking
you
liar.
to abuse me, and you mute me anytime. Anytime I'm actually trying
waiting to be dishonest. What a waste of time. Is this how you enjoy your
Just-
day?
Just muted you again, Timmy. I just want to really make it clear to you. You are on our show. You called in to talk to us on our show. It is perfectly permissible on this show, on the rules of the show. We, the people who make the rules of the show and who are the referees of the show, we get to mute anyone anytime we want. So if you are not engaging in a way that we do not approve of, we can mute you, we can hang up on you, we can do whatever we want. We are willing to talk to you. But the question is, are you only willing to talk with us if we allow you to stay on script, the script that has already been kind of thrown out? You are now unmuted, Timmy.
Do you want me to fawn? You want me to pretend that I'm stupid? I can do that.
I know
No,
Timmy's never going to answer a single thing. He's just sitting here trying to occupy as much space as possible, which is why every time he's offered a chance to answer a question, he instead just asks a question in his whiny little fashion of, let me see how long I can string these guys on. He's not a serious thinker. He doesn't, I'm not even convinced that Timmy is in fact a theist. This feels almost like somebody was bored and sitting around and said, how can I go fuck with some atheists? Well, the answer is you can do this for a little while, but I'm way better at this than you are, Timmy. And since you aren't willing to engage honestly, we'll probably just say goodbye.
I am, Timmy. I would like to. This is obviously gone. No, you're unmuted right now, but just 1 second. I am interested because what happened is you got thrown off your script and you started screaming and crying and saying we were abusing you because we didn't let you do your script. But I am interested, and we never did get to hear in what the contradictions are that you find in the atheistic worldview. I just wonder if we can just get to that point. I am curious about that. Are you capable of elucidating that for us?
Yeah. So you'll have to forgive me. I can't tell when I'm muted or not muted. I'm very happy to share my view with you guys. And I honestly hope that you can prove me wrong, because I believe there's something I'm misunderstanding here. That's why I came here. So I believe the atheistic view to be self-contradictory or internally inconsistent, in that all of us humans, as Matt mentioned earlier, have assumptions as to what reality is. Like, we know that, and we all have to deal with a world that we don't know and is uncertain. But it seems to me, not in every case, but in most cases, atheists tend to claim that their views are based on empirical evidence and proof. So it seems to me that there's an internal inconsistency in that, on one hand, we assume what reality is without any proof, but on the other hand, we claim we know what it is based on proof.
Okay,
and that's not said in the most eloquent manner, but that's how I see it. So please fill some holes in there for me, if you don't mind, gentlemen.
I get it. Yeah, and it's so, Timmy, I'm unfortunately, I'm sorry. I am going to tell you, you did exactly what we figured you were doing. You had a script that you wanted to say. Matt unspooled everything. Matt's already responded. I know, but Matt already answered your question, and you weren't listening because you were upset about being interrupted and being thrown off script, Timmy. Matt already answered your question. He already told you that no, Timmy, you weren't listening. You were yapping the whole time. You were going, abuse. Why are you guys abusing me? If you had been listening, Matt explained to you. All right, Timmy, I'm going to mute you. I'm muting you again, Timmy. So if you had been listening, Timmy, and it's not just talking over Matt while you were on mute, talking to no one, just talking literally to the room, nobody could hear you. But if you had been listening, we were saying Matt he knows what your argument is going to be because he's been doing this for so long. So he got ahead of you and just went, let me guess, when you're talking about the assumptions, you're talking about this. Okay, cool. You have the wrong idea of what our assumptions are, and basically moves on to talking about, can we agree about what the epistemological foundation of our worldview is? You can't answer that question because you're just so committed to your script. Then you get on your script and you go, okay, finally you guys are letting me say my script. And you just ask a question that he already answered. It's like, and that's what we were saying is like, yeah, you just wanted to be on script. So you're saying, and again, you were wrong. You were like, oh, your worldview comes from, things that are empirical that you can prove with empirical evidence. And no, what he said was the default position should be for any truth claim, you should not believe it until sufficient evidence is given to warrant a belief in that truth claim. So it's not that we only, we think we have empirical evidence to justify everything in our worldview. It's that there are a lot of truth claims that people make that there has not been sufficient evidence offered to demonstrate that. But you weren't listening. You were just screaming abuse the entire time that question was being answered. Matt?
This was the thing, is that when Timmy finally got around to it, he's like, hey, a lot of atheists seem to think that their views are based on empirical evidence. No, a lot of people seem to think their views are based on empirical evidence. Some of them are atheists. When I defined atheism for Timmy, it wasn't something that was based on empirical evidence. It is based on the burden of proof and whether or not evidence has been established to satisfy the burden of proof for the claim some God exists. When you reframe it like that, Timmy's understanding of atheism is laid bare. The flaw in his argument is laid bare. His characterization is laid bare. Atheism is the rejection of the claim that it is warranted to believe that a God exists. That's it. It's not based on positive empirical evidence for the non-existence of a God. It is based on the insufficient evidentiary warrant for the God claims. But if you acknowledge that right off the bat, everything that Timmy wanted to say goes away. And that's really frustrating for Timmy. It's so frustrating that he considers it abuse to honestly engage and point out that you don't know who we are, you don't know what the position is, you don't even understand what atheism is, you don't understand the basics of epistemology, but you looked up that we make assumptions and thought, the atheists are making assumptions. I make practical assumptions about the world, the same as anybody else, theist or not. And the burden of proof is on the claim that something exists or that something is so. In analysis, when you say, is there a connection between this event and this event? The null hypothesis is that there is not a connection, and it is up to the person claiming there is a connection to overcome the null hypothesis. Is there a connection between a God being and existence? The null hypothesis is that there is not, and that hypothesis stands, and that hypothesis is atheism until such time as the null hypothesis has been overcome. This is Epistemology 101. It is the cornerstone of skepticism. And if Timmy wasn't so, let's say, dishonest and fake, we could have been there ages ago. Because if Timmy's honest that he wants us to show where his thinking is wrong, I have shown that his foundational assessment of what atheism is incorrect. His assessment of what the burden of proof is incorrect or ill-formed. And that the null hypothesis and the nature of evidence demonstrate that the default position is atheism and that theism has not overcome that default position. So let's find out if Timmy is genuinely happy to have been corrected.
Yeah, Timmy, I'm really curious. Did you hear any of that, or this entire time that you were on mute, were you just screaming about abuse? Did you actually hear anything that was just said? I am unmuting you now.
I was screaming the entire time, obviously. And of course, I'm going to listen to those who don't listen to me. And you guys won today. You did really good.
Timmy. Timmy.
Because not only did I listen to Timmy, but I took notes. I took written fucking notes, and I responded directly to Timmy's claims, which is why I have notes here that begins with what leads to atheism And my response was, there's no demonstration of God. What led to my becoming an atheist? And Timmy's response was my flawed assumptions, and then went on to how we all make assumptions about ontology and epistemology. But yet we all do that. So it's not my flawed assumptions that led to atheism. Timmy is a liar. Timmy says I didn't listen to him. And the truth is, Timmy, as we all saw in this clip, you didn't listen. And you haven't actually said thank you for me correcting you.
You said specifically, Timmy, you said, I hope you guys can prove me wrong. I hope you can offer me an answer. We gave you an answer, and you admittedly did not listen to it. You went, yeah, I'm not going to listen to you guys if you won't listen to me. We did listen to you.
Today.
We did give you a response. And then you said, well, you guys I don't like the way that you responded to me. I don't like, basically what happened is you didn't get the response you were hoping for, which is you were hoping we would go, whoa, Timmy, what? That's the smartest question any theist has ever called in with. And you've just stumped us, Timmy. You've won the show. But we gave you a very, very clear answer. You didn't want that answer. You wanted to just whine about, oh, you're cutting me off. You're interrupting me. You're muting me on our show where we have the controls.
I completely disagree.
Yeah, I know.
I don't think Timmy was expecting that. I don't think Timmy was expecting that. I think Timmy's a bored atheist who decided he would call in and be a fake theist and offer up softballs in order to waste some time and get some clips for the show. I don't think Timmy believes in a God or has any understanding about this at all.
As a theist, I'm flattered that you would think that I'm an atheist, because I am hoping to learn more. Am I still on mute?
You're not on mute. But what I think it's funny that you're flattered that I basically acknowledged you're a liar repeatedly, including about whether or not you believe in God.
I genuinely respect atheists. My brother's an atheist. I've been having this conversation for over 30 years.
Timmy, I didn't ask for anything. I'm completely disinterested in anything about your life story. I'm amazed that you think you still want to talk right now.
Yeah, you're upset that I didn't know yours. Okay.
No. Yes. I didn't call your show, you whiny little bitch. I didn't call your show.
Oh, right. You don't want to talk to theists. I get it.
Oh, no. I want theists to call in and defend their propositions and engage in a good discussion. You're probably not a theist. You're no good at having the conversation. You are a repeated, known, obvious, demonstrable, demonstrated liar who's trying to bust my Zen, and you're going to keep failing because I'm a mile smarter than you and better at this.
Hey, man, I wouldn't disagree that you're smarter than me. That's great. I would disagree that you were debating with me in good faith. It must be convenient to mute any voice you don't like.
I'm sorry, Timmy.
Sit around and
Timmy, this is evidence that you didn't listen to me, because at the beginning I said this isn't a debate and you could book a debate. You see, I debate for a living, and when I do debates, there's not a mute button because there's a format and a moderator, and you get a chance to make your case, and then I offer rebuttals, and I get a chance to make my place, and you offer rebuttals. This is a call-in show where your job as a caller is to call in and say, here's what I believe, why I believe it, and why you should believe it as well. But you failed at all of those because you're not real and you're not looking for the thing. What you're trying to do is basically come in and suggest that, oh, you didn't let me talk, so that you have some, maybe, are you a YouTuber that's looking for a clip where maybe you got hung up on somewhere? Because at this point, after all of this, the fact that you haven't hung up, that means that you're either looking for something you still haven't gotten, or this is like a fetish. Are you like jerking off while I'm talking? Do you want daddy to punish you some more?
You're unmuted now, Timmy.
Okay, cool. So, in regards to what Matt said earlier, about all views needing to be verified before they can be assumed, if I understood correctly, maybe I didn't. Austin Archer, you said that on one hand, I never asked my question, but on the other hand, Matt managed to answer my question. I thought that was interesting. Again,
it's because we knew what the question was going to be.
Please let me finish. I've been quiet for like 20 minutes here. You guys, go right ahead. Abuse, insult.
Well, it's not abuse.
I'm going to continue. It's Austin's turn to abuse you now.
It's the way the show works. It's not abuse. And I'm going to mute you because I like doing it, and I like shutting you up because I have the power to do that. And
I'm jerking
what
off
I said, Timmy, what I said, Timmy, was that we hadn't actually heard. I was like, we haven't actually heard what your script wanted to be. But I said, we know the script. We know that you're mad because you had a script. But I said, what Matt was doing is he knows what your script is going to be. I know what your script is going to be. He's just kind of getting ahead of the script and being like, okay, since I know what your script is, can we actually move the conversation along and save time? I said, let's just let you say your script. And then you said the exact thing that we expected you to say. And the question that you asked was a question that had already been addressed and already been answered. So it wasn't I was saying, well, you haven't asked your question, but we've already answered your question in some kind of impossible contradiction. It was, we had already answered the question because we knew what the question was going to be. And then when you asked the question, it confirmed that, yes, we were in fact correct. You were on a script and you were just waiting to say your script. So don't get it twisted, Timmy. And remember, you are on our show and I will mute you anytime I wish. And that is not abuse, you little baby. You are unmuted now, buddy.
Okay. I'm a baby and my feelings are beginning to, I'm beginning to experience emotions. You were the one who asked me. You said you were genuinely curious as to how I saw a contradiction in the atheistic view. And then suddenly it was also that your friend Matt had already answered that question, and it was absurd of me to point out what I thought was self-contradictory. Now, you can keep abusing that.
All right, I'm muting you again. Shut the fuck up. So again, Timmy, I'm going to re-explain this to you. I was curious to see if the question you were going to ask or if the contradiction you were going to point out was not the script that we thought you were going to run with, was not the script that Matt was already addressing. I was curious. I let you speak, and it turned out that, yes, in fact, the thing we figured you were going to say was the thing you wanted to say. And so I said, oh, Matt already addressed that. If you had been listening to everything Matt said, you would have heard that he already addressed that. So it's not, you're trying to, again, you're not listening to me. You're just so sad about the mute button. You're such a little baby about the mute button that you turn off your brain. The audience is listening. They're listening to you get dunked on. They're listening to you be embarrassed right now, but you're not listening to me. I said, I'm giving you a chance to speak to prove us wrong, that you're not actually going to say the thing we knew you were going to say. And then you did say the thing that Matt knew you were going to say. He already addressed your question, and it proved that you had not been listening. So that is what I said, Timmy. Did you hear me just then? Do you understand that? I'm unmuting you now, Timmy.
Slam dunk, Austin Archer and Matt Dillahunty.
Absolutely.
Enjoy.
Did you hear any of it, Timmy?
No, he's not wrong.
I was listening. Do you mean, was I listening to someone who doesn't listen to me? I actually did listen a little bit. Yeah.
A little bit. What'd you hear?
Dunk.
Timmy, what'd you hear me? What did you hear me just say? Timmy, you stupid motherfucker.
Stupid.
What did you hear me just say? What did you hear me just say? Repeat it back to me. What did you hear me just say?
Oh. Right. So I hope we can have a good debate. I'm trying to figure out.
It's not a debate.
How to listen to
it's not a debate.
You don't even understand what I'm asking.
Timmy, it's not a debate. It's a
understand.
call-in show.
You're right. It is.
What did you hear me just? What did you hear me just say? I want you to repeat back to me what I just said to you.
I wish there were real callers.
I'm sorry. I had you on
too.
mute.
Oh, cool. What did you hear me just say?
I wasn't listening to you. Would you like me to repeat that?
I know you weren't. And I'm going to hang up on you now, Timmy. That's it. Yeah. I know you weren't listening, bud. And you're right, Matt. That was nothing. But hopefully it was fun for our chat. Do any theists actually want to call in and talk? Yeah.
Yeah, evidently not. I mean, I'm here. I'm unrattleable. I would love for somebody to actually defend it. So, for example, if we were to, let's take the bullshit from Timmy out of it and just honestly address what was actually claimed. And that is, we all make assumptions about ontology and epistemology. First of all, I don't think we necessarily make assumptions about ontology and epistemology in the broad category sense, but we make ontological assumptions and we make epistemological assumptions. And that's because there's no solution to the problem of hard solipsism, which just means, sorry for those who aren't as philosophically minded, I can't prove that I don't live in a matrix. I can't prove that reality is real because everything is contingent on the information coming in from my senses, which I have no way to demonstrate. I think I have a somewhat reasonable counter to the problem of hard solipsism, which is this. There are two solipsistic models that one could propose. One is that I am the only mind in existence and I am inventing all of the reality that I experience. I reject that one as remotely likely because it means I hate myself because I've built a reality where things are getting worse and where I really enjoy the good calls that are few and far between, but I keep sending bad calls in. So I reject that one. It also means that I have written every beautiful song and every Nickelback song. I have written every wonderful piece of poetry. I have composed every movie and everything that caught me by surprise. I have also taught myself everything, including things that I didn't once understand, like I didn't used to know how to read or spell or do math, and I learned those things. I didn't know as much about philosophy. I didn't know as much about religion. I learned those things. I memorized certain verses. That means that I'm responsible for everything, including surprising me. So the other model of solipsism is that I'm essentially a brain in a vat being fed a reality from elsewhere. And the problem with that is that while I can't demonstrate it's not true, what's the reason to think that explanation is the most reasonable? And in reality, we operate on this pragmatic assumption that what we experience is real, because it would be arrogant to suggest, oh, you don't fucking matter. You're not real. This reality was created for me, which, by the way, is a more isolated version of what many theists think, that reality was not just created for humans, but that reality was created for their God's specific special people. So we make assumptions out of that are pragmatic. But the nice thing about science is that science doesn't make proclamations of truth. It creates testable models and hypotheses, and we proportion our confidence in those hypotheses to their evidential support. So what Timmy was saying is, if we all make assumptions and none of us know, atheism is somehow, in his mind, claiming to know something based on evidence that you can't know. But atheism isn't claiming to know anything. It is, in fact, theism that is claiming to know the answer. Why is there something rather than nothing? My answer, and I bet Austin's, is I don't know. Maybe it couldn't have been any other way. Maybe there's an explanation we don't know. But theists are claiming, I know why it's happened, or I am completely convinced or strongly convinced that it's because there's a being. Okay, even if you don't claim to know and you don't claim a high level of confidence, what justification is there for believing that something exists because there's a thinking agent who desired that it existed? Oh, well, it's just, I can't think of anything better. Well, cool. I can. And even if I couldn't, that doesn't, it's like saying, hey, we found a dead body. Who did it? And you say, oh, I'm convinced the butler did it. And I say, why? And it's like, well, who else could have? I don't know. I don't even know if the butler could have. Have you run through due process here? Have you shown motive, opportunity, any of that stuff? Well, no, but I mean, I can't think of anyone better to do it other than the butler. Okay, cool. Does this person even have a butler? Is there a butler at all involved in this? Well, there must be. I just said that it was the best explanation. Okay, can you show me a butler? Well, now this is just abuse.
Yeah. You're assuming things just like I am. We're all assuming things. You're assuming that it wasn't the butler, and I'm assuming that it was the butler. We're the same here. And it's like, no, I'm not assuming that it was or wasn't. I am observing the dead body and making no truth claims without any evidence being presented to me about how that happened. I will go where the evidence leads, And if you are able to present a compelling case, I'm willing to entertain it. I'm willing to follow you down that path, you know? But you're the one who's just saying it's this. And what the only thing we're ever asking on this show, week in and week out, is walk us through the evidence, make the case. Don't just tell us what your theory is, that something's happened, there's been a murder, and I've got a theory that it was this guy. Okay, great. We understand that. When you call in and it says theist next to your name, that's like you calling in and it says the butler did it next to your name. We understand what your theory is. The question of the show is, you're here to walk us through your evidence. Can you demonstrate why you're so convinced it was the butler who committed the murder in this analogy? And it's like, we are not sitting here asserting that it was anyone else or that we're asking you to demonstrate your case. And it was so funny too in that call, because I pointed out to Timmy, who I think you're right, largely just a troll and a waste of time, but maybe made for some entertaining minutes on the show. But he kept saying, well, why would I listen to people who don't listen to me? And I pointed out to him, well, the audience is listening. They're paying attention. Yeah. And they know, it's in the record, that we are clearly listening to you and responding to you. We are responding to the assertions that you're making. We're responding to what you've called in to say. We said, we have a hunch here that you're on a script and that you're annoyed that you're being knocked off your script. And then after you had already gone through and explained why his script was fallacious and bad, we allowed him the opportunity to say his script, and it was indeed the script that we figured it would be. Pointed that out to him. Yeah, that's what we figured you were going to say, and that's why Matt said everything he just said. And it was in the record that the audience knows. We listened to that caller, we responded to that caller, and that caller admittedly did not listen to us. Every time I asked him, did you hear anything that was just said? He said, why would I listen to people who are interrupting me and not listening to me? So,
yeah. I have
Timmy was a big baby.
By the way, phone lines are open, and I'm happy, even though we were primarily just going for theists today. There's no more theist callers right now, so I'm happy to, I guess, take some atheist callers who might have questions. But also, I've now been doing the Zen mode thing for like a week and some change or whatever, and the number of theist calls has fallen through the floor. And so the question then becomes, is this a mistake? Should I just go back to being, having the righteous indignation that I normally would? But I don't know. And I'm not remotely willing to give up. And I'm quite enjoying not getting blood pressure up, although the show has occasionally counted as cardio for me. So I'm fine with that, but I've got a couple.
You're burning calories. You're burning calories, yelling at theists.
I love chess. I was actually playing some chess while the callers were on there. If you watch like chess streamers playing bullet chess, they'll put like a heart rate monitor on, just like the gamers do, and it's partly because people are like, oh, you professional gamers, that's not a real sport. Well, okay, first of all, as the former leader of the #1 Counter-Strike team on the planet and somebody who was instrumental in setting up things like the Cyber Athlete Professional League and other stuff, it's absolutely a sport, and not just because it absolutely does get your heart rate up. But oh no, sports isn't, unless you're, if you're sitting in a chair and you're not messing with a ball or something, not whatever. I get the sniping, but go watch the chess streamers and watch what their heart rate gets to. Matter of fact, maybe that's something fun we could do. I've got a pulse ox in the other room. I could put it on and show what my pulse is.
It's also a wildly ableist thing to claim, to just be like, if you're not running and jumping, it's not a sport. Yeah. Which one of these people would you like to talk to, Matt?
Well, I'm going to say that there's only one call, and it's in the screening room right now. You could just throw caution to the wind and just say, I'm taking that one right now, even though our call screener is not done with them.
Let's do it. Let's just see what
Sorry,
happens.
Stephanie.
Sorry, Stephanie. We're just we're picking it up. John, he, him, an atheist from California. John, you're on with Matt and Austin. I don't even know what this call's about. What would you like to talk about, John?
Oh, I was calling about to get your guys' opinion on what is the best Bible to start for a person to read, and what's the Bible that you would say is the most, I guess, problematic or I guess not informative of, I don't know, things. I'm sorry.
For what purpose? So that you can better be equipped to know the Bible, to debate theists, or what is?
Yeah, like,
do you have an answer for that? Like, are you asking like? Are you asking like what's the most up to date? What's the most universally used and regarded as like the most correct version right now in the world?
Yeah, basically for like an educational purposes.
Do you have thoughts on that, Matt?
I'm going to try and do this without being awful. Arden, can you put me up full screen? So the utility that you see behind me is called eSword. And I'm pretty sure that if you go to e-sword.net, you will find this utility. It was created specifically as a Bible training and teaching tool for pastors and people like that. What you see right here is a bunch of different, well, if I hadn't lost my mouse cursor, well, there we go. A bunch of different Bibles at the top. Like this is the King James Version, but this is the expanded King James Version, which also includes, here are the actual Hebrew letters. So when you look at Genesis 1:1 and you see heavens and the earth, you can look this up and you can see that H776, which is Eretz, is what the root of it is. You can then look up what occurrences there are. It is a great study Bible. And it doesn't just do that for Hebrew. It also digs in on the Greek and Aramaic. So if you're in the New Testament, you can see what the Hebrew words are. You can see the Greek word. And there's plenty of different Bibles here. So here's the English Standard Version. Here's the Darby Bible, the English Revised Version. Here's an expanded ESV. And then over here on the right, there are biblical commentaries and study things. So like when you go to like Matthew 5, so we'll go right into the Sermon on the Mount, you can see that, boom, here's the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Well, this is Matthew 5:3. When I click on that particular verse, it will load up in the commentary over here what different Christian luminaries and scholars have said about a number of different things. And you can go and compare versions. You can actually set up a screen to do side-by-side comparisons. There is no reason for anyone to go buy a Bible or care about getting a copyrighted Bible like an NIV. There are people that will only care about the AV 1611. That's the AV is authorized version. And so this is the 1611 King James original, translation. And so why not have a number of different Bibles at the ready? This is open every time I'm doing a show, because while I've studied the Bible since I was 5, I'm not a Bible scholar, and I don't have completely, well, it's open almost all the time, but I don't have complete exhaustive knowledge, and I don't want to make mistakes. And so it's, let me look something up. Let me figure out what's going on. Oh yeah, it's this. And then I can go with what I've learned and studied over the years. But it would be one of the early mistakes I made in an episode of the Atheist Experience. You can chew up again, Arden. Thank you. There was an episode of the show that Russell and I did, and we were asked about the ontological argument. And without missing a beat, we both gave a complete deconstruction of a cosmological argument. And the caller was like, well, that was a really good response to the cosmological argument, but I asked about the ontological argument. And we were both like, holy shit, how did our brains just do that? And with something as big as the Bible, if I'm trying to remember, for example, in which of the 3 synoptic gospels this particular event occurs, or this particular saying occurs, I've got a quick and easy way to search it. And while I think I have 6 physical Bibles, within reach of my desk. No, 4 within reach of my desk at the moment. I almost never open them anymore because I've got this. So don't buy a Bible. Go pay for this piece of software and download the stuff. It's free or cheap. And then you'll figure out how much you really do or don't want to study this stuff.
It never ceases to amaze me that a tool like that exists that was developed for the purpose of studying to be a pastor or a priest, or, to be a person who is scholarly, schooled in the Bible, is biblically literate. It was created by theists for theists to know the Bible inside and out, and that they can see right there all of the different translations, interpretations, all of the different wordings, and that doesn't fire some kind of alarm in their head of, oh, if this is supposed to be the infallible, immovable, unchangeable word of God, there should only be one text. There should not be 30 different ways to read a particular verse. It never ceases to amaze me that people know this, that they know that there are all of these different interpretations and versions, and that they just sort of go, I'm just going to pick whichever one I like best and go with that one. It's just the cognitive, dissonance involved in that is just fascinating to me. Well, John.
Okay.
I feel like that was I feel like that was a pretty solid answer to your question, right?
It is. And thank you for your time, and have a good Sunday.
You too. Enjoy your Sabbath day. Be sure to keep it holy, John. Okay? I'll trust you to do that.
All right.
Take it easy. Okay. Yeah. Would you like to talk to Jason here, Matt?
I'm happy to talk to anybody who you want to talk to.
We got time. Jason is here from California. Jason is an atheist calling to ask about the ontological argument for God and why anyone would take it seriously. Jason, you are on the line with Matt and Austin. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing all right.
So I guess I'll just get into the question. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, so I see people like William Lane Craig and others using the ontological argument for God, like people who have academic credentials. Actual philosophers argue about it and seem to take it seriously, but I've never really been able to understand it as a reasonable argument for God. For example, I guess the basic problem with it that I see is, why does existence, why is that a prerequisite for perfection? I don't understand why something that is perfect has to exist. For example, like why that existence makes it more perfect and it's imperfect without existence, I guess, is my main problem with understanding it. Is there a problem with my understanding of the ontological argument, or is everyone just missing something obvious?
Yeah, Matt, I think you're going to have a better time with this than me.
So that's the most common objection, is that why is existence a necessary component of the abstract and ill-defined greatest? And the response is just, well, something that has all power but doesn't exist is clearly not as great as something that has all power and also exists. And it is relying on intuition more than a demonstration. I see no reason why existence is necessarily an ontological component of greatness, or and the argument is for greatness, not perfection. I just did a video not long ago about is God perfect, and the absurdity of anything being perfect actually existing. But I think it relies on the intuition that something that exists is intuitively greater than something that doesn't exist. And I think one of the funnier responses would be, wouldn't it be greater if there was a being that's exactly as powerful as God and has done everything that God is credited with doing, but did it all while not existing? Wouldn't it actually be a greater power to do all of this while being hindered by also not existing? But at the end of the day, you also have this notion that even if you could demonstrate some sort of tie to the origin of the universe, there's no reason to think that God continues to exist. And yet they will just say, but the God that continues to exist is greater than the God that existed and ceased to exist. There is no demonstration of this. It is, and it's not even that I object. Intuitively, which is greater, me that doesn't exist or me that exists? Well, I'm biased towards me existing. I kind of like it. And similarly, a unicorn that doesn't exist is not as great as a unicorn that does exist to me, but it's kind of like this personal assessment and intuition. There's not an actual demonstration of why existence should be an ontological function of greatness, or predecessor to greatness, not function, sorry.
Yeah, that pretty much aligns exactly with how I think about it too, because intuitively it makes sense that something that exists is greater than something that doesn't. But I would also argue that, conceptual things don't exist, and yet I don't necessarily think concepts would be made greater by existing. And so I've never been able to I've never been able to understand the logic insofar as that it's actually been demonstrated that this follows from that, rather than it's just intuitively follows. But I don't think intuition is a good enough reason. What's that?
No,
I think we agree with you.
Let's assume for a second that it is a function of greatness, that which has 10 great things and doesn't exist is inferior to the thing that has 10 great things and exists. Let's just assume that's true. The biggest problem with the ontological arguments is essentially they are an attempt to define a God into existing. They're claiming that it's necessarily the case that the greatest thing then must exist. And this is kind of like the flaw at the beginning with Cole, that because we have a desire, it is probable or likely that there is a thing that is causing that desire because it's going to fulfill it. It is tied to the same sort of category of ontological arguments. And yes, I agree.
Okay, well, that pretty much answers my question. That's all I had. I just wanted to say I'm loving Zen Matt, even if the theist callers aren't.
Well, thank you. I don't plan to stop. I'll keep doing it as long as I enjoy it, and as long as it doesn't, make the show worse.
Thanks for calling in, Jason. That was a nice little chat. Have a great rest of your Sunday.
Thank you. You too.
All righty.
Somebody in chat said this was a great opportunity to make a joke about Matt debunking the cosmological argument, since he just told that story. I should have absolutely. That's incredibly clever.
That would have been really funny if you went into a whole explanation about why the.
That would have been a great callback for me just to respond to. Well, you see, existence is a necessary predicate of the cosmological argument.
And then the caller goes, "Oh, that's lovely, Matt. I did ask about the ontological. Same exact clip. That would be really great. I am actually interested in. No problem. I'm interested in what Sean is asking here. So I'm going to bring in Sean from Washington, an atheist. Sean, hi. You are on the air with Matt and Austin. Could you, first of all, how are you today?
I'm doing great, and always glad to have both of you guys on the show here. Austin, I was following you on TikTok for a while. I was almost thinking Cole might have been from the power company, but no, that wasn't him. And then a little inside joke there, deep inside. And then I'm doing pretty good today. The weather is a little too hot to be doing anything really active outside, so I'm just chilling, watching airplanes, and listening to call-in shows. And I am an atheist. And Matt asking about the whether or not the proof that I'm an atheist.
I'm just having
Hey,
fun.
Jesus, if you're up there, go ahead and no, I was going to say crash an airplane on me. That would risk other people. Just strike me with a lightning bolt on a clear day. Strike me with a lightning bolt on a clear day. That would be really easy for a god to do. But I think I've tempted him enough times over the year and over the years in increasing methods, and never seems to take me up on it. But no, I'm pretty solidly not a theist anymore. I used to be. And part of that was because I had friends who weren't afraid to make fun of me a little bit and tease me about my beliefs, because I know in my private times I would be studying the scriptures together. Growing up as a Mormon, even, I sometimes wouldn't even read the scriptures without a
Really quick, will you just do us a favor and just step back from your receiver just a little bit? We're getting some of that popping that you hear on the show from time to time.
Sure. How about now?
Thank you. Sound better. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so growing up as a Mormon, I usually didn't read the scriptures without a study guide. I always had to have a study guide or a plan whenever I was reading the scriptures. But anytime I would actually sit there alone and read the stories, I'd be like, man, some of this stuff, if I didn't already believe it, I could see why someone would think we were making this stuff up. And I'm just wondering, do you guys think it is effective to give a little mockery once in a while? And what role is it effective to be a little bit of an asshole unapologetically sometimes?
I'm going to speak for myself. I'm going to go first here. I'll speak for myself. I just talked about this on the last episode of my podcast. I was talking about, I mentioned this earlier in the episode that was talking about cults of deception and these cults that sort of require people to exclusively speak dishonestly. And that I've had people in my audience before go, if they're not willing to be honest, maybe we should just be willing to fight dirty too, and we should be liars too, because the truth doesn't seem to be working out for us. And there sort of comes up that idea of like, well, maybe we should be willing to get our hands dirtier and we should get down in the muck with them. And I brought up Luthen Rael, who's a character from Andor, which is I'm a huge Andor fan, and I'm a huge believer that Andor is one of the best things ever made in the Star Wars universe. But Luthen Rael is this character who's kind of the father of the resistance in the Star Wars universe, and he believes in using the tools of his oppressor to resist them. And it's a big, kind of moral question of the character Luthen is his life is all about deception. He lies to everyone. He is okay with killing people, with sacrificing good people, letting good people die. He puts the cause above everything, and he's a very ends justifies the means kind of character. And so I asked the question on the podcast, or somebody called in and said, or wrote in and said, is it ever justified for us to engage in the kind of deception that our ideological opponents engage in order to achieve our end goals? And I personally said, I don't believe so. I don't believe in using the tools of my ideological opponents to oppress them. I don't believe in a fire with fire kind of mentality. I believe that you need to use the antithesis of dishonesty and deception to combat dishonesty and deception. Now, when it comes to the question of like, am I using the tools of my oppressor when I'm a little bit rude, when I'm mocking and deriding people, am I just acting like Donald Trump? When I mock and deride, conservatives, am I just doing the same thing that they do to people on the left? And am I using the tools of my oppressor to fight them? I personally argue, no, it's not quite the same, because, so let's take the thing that, conservatives love to deride the entire queer community as being full of pedophiles and sex criminals, even though demonstrably they exist in churches that have an epidemic, just a rash of sex criminals and pedophiles. Like, all the data points to that they are the ones who are actually, this is psychological projection, and it's also just dishonest. And so if I do the same thing and I just go like you're a bunch of like sex freaks and criminals, maybe I'm being a little, maybe it could sound like I'm saying the same thing, but my thing is actually rooted in an empirically evidential reality that I can point to and say, the data suggests that what I'm saying is actually factual and true. And this came up earlier on the episode where I think it was Cole, or maybe it was Timmy, said to Matt, nice ad hominem. And I said you don't know what an ad hominem is, and what I meant was you don't know what an ad hominem fallacy is. And then Matt pointed out, yeah, it's only fallacious if the insult, if the derisive comment that you're making is used in place of your substantive argument. If it's the Earth is flat, and I say no, it's not because you're ugly, that's an ad hominem fallacy. But if I say, no, it's not, and it's an oblate spheroid, and all of the data points to it being an oblate spheroid, all of the objective metrics that we have, like you could demonstrate that the Earth is flat by just going to the fucking edge of the Earth and showing us that, but you can't do that. And everything that we do have that we can look at that's measurable suggests that it's an oblate spheroid. You fucking dumbass. Me adding on "you fucking dumbass" to the end of that does not invalidate my argument. It does not make my argument
your
fallacious.
Point didn't depend on it. Your point didn't depend on it being him being an idiot. You weren't saying that it's round because you're an idiot. No, it's round. Here's why. And you're an idiot. But that's not
you're an idiot for
my argument. That is the fact that, period on the end of the argument.
So what I would say is,
pointed out that Timmy was a whiny little bitch and a liar. That was not a presupposition, and it was not an argument, and it was not a response to his arguments. It was as an assessment of his character based on evidence presented during the call.
Exactly. And I my personal position when it comes to like, is it useful? Is mockery useful? Is if it's based in an evidential, if it's based in a true assessment of a person's character and conduct, then have at it. Like if you're telling the truth when you call someone a whiny little baby, or when you point out that someone's reasoning is laughably stupid, have at it. Like if you can back up what you're saying, if you can back up the shit that you're talking, I kind of believe go ahead and talk that shit. Like, I just think as long as is what the shit you're talking is rooted in something that you feel like you can substantively back up, do it. Because I think it is good for people's egos to be broken down a little bit and chiseled away at, as long as you're leaving them in a position where they can't defend what they're trying to defend. That's my take. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm in agreement. It's the things I've regretted the most over the 20 years that I've done this are the cheap shots that weren't relevant to anything, that weren't relevant to a call. It was, an exercise in my own frustration and stuff like that. I think there's a time and a place for mockery and ridicule. I was mentioning the other day on Twitch, the atheist community of content creators, I divide into two different categories. One are the people who are trying to honestly engage, educate, and entertain, and that includes channels that sometimes or primarily engage in mockery, but it's mockery done right. Like, look at Dark Matter 2525. This sort of satirical, jousting, well thought out. That's why I've been a supporter of his from the beginning on Patreon, etc. There are I have no respect for YouTube atheists who chase the algorithm and seek to get an audience to get paid, who don't engage with people, who don't debate, who don't think. It's just like, ooh, let me show you how dumb the Christians and creationists are. Ha ha ha. If that's the extent of it, I'm unimpressed. There's a reason why there are some incredibly popular YouTube atheists that you will never see on a show with me. And it's, it's either because they don't want to or they haven't been asked. And if they don't want to, that's their prerogative. If they haven't been asked, it's because I have some sort of issue. I don't think they're necessarily a good fit, because what we do here is different. They may be great at that. Like, Dark Matter's probably not going to end up sitting here co-hosting with me, because I don't know for sure if he has any interest or would be any good live. Some people need to come up with a script. When it comes to ridicule, I think the regrets are when I've ridiculed the person instead of the idea. And I think the way Austin phrased some things today is wonderful and will help me change some of the stuff, because instead of being a whiny little bitch, because bitch is a problematic word for me anyway, and yet I keep finding myself using it. I liked the little baby thing, but also saying that's a stupid idea doesn't in any way imply that you're stupid, because I guarantee you, in the 20 years that I've sat here done this, I've had fuck tons of stupid ideas. I have said fuck tons of stupid things, and fuck tons is an actual unit of measurement, I know. And I don't think I'm stupid. The acknowledgement that we can all buy into bullshit, that we can all be irrational, that we can all make mistakes is fundamental. And so instead of saying you're an idiot, you can just say that's a stupid idea. You don't have to say that's a stupid idea, though. You can be like, that's irrational, that's fallacious. That's normally where I try to start. But when they keep pushing back, then you'll see me. It'll go from that's fallacious, that's irrational. Okay, that's just fucking stupid. And I'm a mile smarter than you and better at this, as if a mile was a measure of smartness, which is funny because I have no idea who's smarter across the board. I don't even know how to measure.
I think a self-deprecating sense of humor a lot of the time is able to be, in my mind, a good benchmark for it, because I used to believe almost all the things that these people calling in believe currently. So I'm not any smarter than they were at that time. I'm not even dumber than they were. I don't assume they're dumber than I was. I used to believe those same things. I fell for the exact same tricks. So anything I'd say to them in present tense is something I would absolutely admit about myself in past tense, or sometimes in current tense. I am an idiot sometimes.
Timmy might be massively smarter than me on 9 out of 10 days in 9 out of 10 subjects. But here today in this day, definitely not smarter than me. Who knows?
Yeah, the way that he engaged was not as logically sound or based in truth. Like, he wasn't engaging in good faith. I do want to say, you mentioned earlier that mockery had been useful to you growing up Mormon when people would point out things. And a good example, I think, of like what is useful mockery versus unuseful mockery is like, maybe you grew up like I did, hearing things about Mormons that like Mormons have horns. Did you ever hear that one?
I didn't hear that one as much, but I have heard one, not anything sincere though. Like, no one actually went over and tried to feel my head or anything.
But so, and let's say one that's even more rooted in maybe something that is true is anytime you'd go out of, I grew up in Utah, and anytime we'd go out of town and we'd tell people where we were from, their first question would be like, so how many moms do you have? Or how many, and then I would have to go, oh, well, the mainstream church doesn't really practice polygamy anymore. And it's kind of this thing where you get used to easily dismissing a lot of maybe the things that come your way that feel mocking, like, do you have horns, or does your dad have multiple wives? Because you see them as not being based in reality. So it's a mockery that doesn't feel like it just feels like that person is ignorant. Like, they're just saying things that aren't true. But if they're mocking something that actually is accurate, if they're demonstrating that they have a working knowledge of what it is that you believe in, and they go, so let me get this right. Joseph Smith wrote this book by reading it out of a hat using peepstones, and he dictated it to another guy, and then that guy gave the pages that they had dictated to his wife, and she lost the pages, and they had to redo it. And he had to it's like, and that's how this book was written. And you're like sitting there knowing that all of that is true. And they're saying it like they're making fun of you, but you have no defense because you're just like, yeah, that's what we think happened. And it's like, okay. And do you hear how stupid that sounds? And it's a thing that's based in, it's true. Whereas,
that's
so
exactly
it's like
the thing that's exactly the kind of message that got me to question it. Like you were saying earlier on about this topic on your podcast, we don't get a safe space. We are designed to not have a safe space where we can ask hard questions about our own religion. If we have any kind of study group around others, it's at family home evening, it's at seminary, it's at Sunday school. So when we ask those questions, we're not given a safe place to be able to ask ridiculous questions like, come on, that sounds a little weird that he'd actually translate it using a stone in a hat or anything like that. We're not allowed to ask that kind of question, so you don't. But you ask it in your mind maybe, and then one friend who isn't a Mormon might go and make fun of it, and you go, well, yeah, it is kind of silly when you say it out loud like that.
Right. And like inversely, like, you know, if we're talking about politics, when a conservative comes to me and goes like, well, at least I don't, you know, support drag queens who are all pedophiles. I'm like, well, there's no data that supports that at all. You've clearly never been to a drag show. You clearly know no drag queens. Nothing that they're saying and what they're trying to attack my ideology and my support for the queer community, but it's not based in a data in anything that they can substantively demonstrate with that data. Whereas I can go, you knowingly are voting for a guy who has been credibly accused of sexual assault dozens of times, and that's just a fact. And that's something that you know, you go to a church where the, like, you know, the youth pastor, like Mike Birbiglia had a joke in his latest special, which is that he was like, you know, if they told me that there was a Whole Foods where sometimes kids get molested at that Whole Foods, I just wouldn't go to that Whole Foods anymore. It doesn't, like, sometimes is my amount of not needing to get. So if you just tell me, oh, they only do it sometimes, that's my number. My number is sometimes. And like, and that's, they can't do anything about it because it's based in truth that every time some new guy gets caught trying to hook up with kids, it's some youth pastor that's been, you know, that probably has clips of himself online talking about the dangers of homosexuality and pedophilia and whatnot.
Oh yeah,
but,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I got one last thing I was going to say before I
Okay.
let you guys get to any other calls here. But I was just going to say, anytime I have been in a position of leadership or power, I've let people know my rule, and that is that if I'm an asshole on purpose, I'm not going to apologize about it. But if I'm an asshole on accident, I want to know about it because I'm going to apologize, and I probably owe you cookies or something. Like if I use the wrong pronoun or the wrong name, even I'm going to want to sincerely apologize. But if I said something sincere and it came off rude and blunt, I mean, maybe I could have said it a little bit different, but I'm not apologizing. I said it to convey what I needed to say.
Yeah, exactly. And that is the difference, is as long as you're doing your best to be honest and have integrity and be able to stand 10 toes down on the shit that you're talking, go ahead and talk the shit. Thanks for the call, Sean. We do have a theist here, so I'm going to let you go.
Absolutely.
And have a nice
Thanks,
day. Thanks for calling. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that assessment, that it's like, you know, and that's the difference too, is when we do misspeak, you know, when we do make, when we, sometimes every once in a while we'll dip our toe in something and realize, oh, whoops, I was maybe pointing at something in error, or I misheard what, you know, but I think being willing to own when you're wrong and all that stuff. Let's get into this call. We've got Sam here from California, a theist, calling us on this Sabbath day. Sam, you are on the air with Matt and Austin. What do you have for us today?
Hi guys, appreciate your show. It's pretty cool being on here. But I just had a couple questions for you guys. Like my first topic would be something like not regarding the Bible. So you guys are atheists. Wouldn't you say, I've had this question answered before, but I've never really understood it, right? So how could you say that there's a lack of belief in gods when a lot of people point to the sun and would call it a god?
Okay.
What?
Sam, here real quickly.
Right, like
First of all, Sam, I didn't say there was a lack of beliefs in God. There are billions of people who believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've never made that claim, Sam. What are you talking about?
Meanwhile,
Like an
it says
atheist.
here that
Right.
it says here that you're calling to say that archaeological evidence points toward the truth of the Bible, and I'm ready to have that conversation. But instead of having that conversation, you immediately begin by asking us a question about something we've never claimed and that I've never heard even suggested as a claim, and that isn't relevant to the theist-atheist debate or position at all.
Sam, are you misunderstanding when atheists say we have a lack of belief in a deity? Because that's all we claim, is we have, like, I personally, Austin Archer, do not believe in a deity. I'm not saying, no atheist I've ever met has made the claim that people don't believe in deities. The reason why this show exists is because we know people have pointed at the sun and called it a god, and that the god myth has expanded out from that point in written language ever since. That's why we're
we
here.
Used to believe.
Yeah, and
I think maybe
believe.
yeah, maybe I worded the question wrong. What I meant is like how can you have a lack of belief in a God where some people might not even say that God has supernatural abilities, but they just say that the sun is their God. Like the sun exists. So
I don't. So
I don't,
okay.
Mhm.
So
Oh.
let me see if I understand this correctly, Sam. You're saying we say we lack a belief in a God, but somebody can say the sun is a God, and we definitely believe in the sun, so therefore we don't lack a belief in a God. Except the answer is, I believe that the sun exists. I don't believe that the sun is a God.
That's the answer.
okay, but
So someone might say
Mhm.
that mountain over there is my God. I like to go into the mountains and hike and be in nature. And that mountain to me, Mother Earth, the nature, it breathes and it speaks to me. And I say, good for you. That mountain exists. And I do not believe that it is a conscious God being. We have a difference of opinion, or we have a difference of belief when it regards that thing that does exist. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, that kind of explains it. All
Cool.
right.
Do you want to get into
But
what
yeah,
the archaeological evidence is
yes,
for the Bible?
yeah,
Okay.
sure. Okay. So just like the biggest thing that I have is probably the fact that Noah planted uh the what is it the vineyard after the flood, and then they found it. They found the oldest vineyard on the mountain of Ararat in Armenia, which is the Arini One cave. And I'm just
I'm
curious, like,
sorry.
doesn't that kind of prove towards credibility of the Bible?
No, so you're saying that because the Bible says Noah planted a vineyard and we found a really old vineyard, that confirms that the Noah story is real? Even if there was a person named Noah, and even if that person planted a vineyard, and even if we found an old vineyard that said planted by Noah, would that confirm that the entire earth was flooded by God as a punishment?
I would say that that piece of evidence is definitely not the only one that points to it, but
No,
they
no, no.
also
I'm
found like
sorry.
the yeah
Well, but answer the
It's like
question first.
I'm trying to get
Yeah.
people to
yeah.
actually answer the
Yeah.
question that they're asked and not the question that they
Mhm.
would rather be asked. So, if we found a vineyard that said this vineyard was planted by Noah, would that confirm anything else about the Noah story?
Just that alone, no.
Right.
Correct. So,
Correct.
how is that in any way archaeology confirming the Bible? Because there are different claims in the Bible, some of which are mundane and trivial, and their truth may be completely inaccessible and irrelevant. Like, I don't care if, you know, um, if Seth existed or if it's just a character that they put in. Then there are other claims in the Bible that are incredibly important and may not be testable or identifiable in any way. So we got mundane claims, which are things like this person existed, this place existed, whatever. And then extraordinary claims like God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah and turned Lot's wife into a pillar of salt. God flooded the entire earth except for a drunk and his sons and their daughters, and they repopulated the earth by putting animals on a boat that couldn't possibly have held all those animals. Does archaeology ever confirm or give credible evidence for anything other than the mundane biblical claims?
I would say yes,
Cool. Like
but
what?
like the GPR scans they did on the I don't know, you probably seen that the boat they found, the boat shape they found on the mountain of Ararat. And they did like a GPR scan on it, and it was exactly 300 cubits long, just like in the Bible.
No,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
The question was.
That is a completely
Mhm.
mundane thing. And by the way, the arc-shaped thing on Mount Ararat has never been confirmed to even be that, just because it's roughly the same size. But even if we found a big boat that said this boat was built by Noah, would that confirm anything other than a mundane fact?
I think it would confirm that yes, because it would confirm the fact that he used the boat for the flood. No,
No, it wouldn't.
which
No, it wouldn't. How does finding a boat-shaped object that is about the same size as what's described in the Bible confirm that that boat was sailed during a global flood, carrying animals and set to repopulate the earth? How does that happen? How does that confirm it?
well, it gives it credibility. No, and like having a boat on the top of a mountain is kind of weird.
Sam, imagine
Wouldn't you say?
if you imagine with me, if you will, that
Mhm.
the town that I live in is flooded, and that I'm a deeply religious person, and that in order to avoid that flood, I build myself a boat, and I carry myself and my family away from the flood. And then when the waters subside, I get out of the boat and I store my boat on a hillside, and then I write down an account of what happened to me. And because I'm a religious person, I explain there was a flood. I built a boat. I got my family to safety. But I also make it that I write into the story, God did this to punish the iniquity of man, to punish the sin of man. And I color it with my religious beliefs. And then I put in all this magical stuff about like my interpretation of what was going on with the storm and all of that, and then thousands of years go by. And this written record that I've written of this event, it exists, and it's been passed down, this story. And people find my boat, and they find the vineyard that I planted, and they find my story of it. Does the fact that what you've been able to archaeologically verify, what you've maybe been able to archaeologically verify is the existence of the boat that I made and the vineyard that I planted. You have no archaeological evidence to support the fact that I claim in my story it was a flood made by God to wipe out all of humanity and to punish humanity for being evil. That you've found no evidence whatsoever to support that I was able to house on that boat 2 of every animal species that existed on Earth. You found no evidence whatsoever to support the claim that the author of the book, me, was in direct communication with God and spoke to God and angels. There is no archaeological evidence to support anything other than that I had a boat and I had a vineyard. That's it. That's what you found, right?
Sure, yes, but like, don't you think it gives it credibility? And it's possible that the flood wasn't even
No.
global. Like,
I don't. No, my experience of life does not give.
Sam,
Yeah.
how does a non-global flood solve the problem that the Bible claims it was trying to solve?
I don't get I'm not understanding the question.
Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with the Bible, but in the Bible story about Noah, what had happened was the earth had become corrupt, and God regretted that he'd made humans. And so he
Yes.
decides he's going to hit the reset button, and he's going to flood the entire earth in order to wipe out everyone except for Noah and his family and the animals that they brought on the ark. If it was just a regional flood, how on earth does that solve the problem God's supposedly trying to solve?
It could have been hyperbole, no? Like, it could have been really
Right.
exaggerated.
No, exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
It could
Exactly,
be,
Sam. That's the point, Sam, is that like the stuff that actually could exist in reality is there could have been a flood because we know that floods exist, we observe them, and there could have been a guy with a boat who got his family to safety, and there could have been a guy who wrote a story about it. Yeah,
like in the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Right. But nothing about that record shows evidence of anything supernatural, Sam. And like you said, the supernatural elements are most likely hyperbole. And it's most likely hyperbole based on the fact that people at that time didn't really understand what was going on when natural disasters happened, when earthquakes happened, and when tornadoes happened and volcanoes happened. It felt like the gods were screaming at them. And so the way that they would write down stories about it was usually to say God was angry and he dumped down water on us to clean out our sins. It was a primitive understanding of natural geological processes.
And
no, I agree with you, but
hyperbole isn't true, and archaeology cannot confirm hyperbole. So we're back to, give me an example of an archaeological find that occurred that supports anything other than a mundane fact.
Right, but just to go back to that last point really quickly, if I can. Yeah.
Sam, no. When I say give me an example, you don't get to say right but and then go on to the next thing in your script as if we didn't just address the thing you said. I'm looking for an example of an archaeological finding that confirms something beyond the mundane about the Bible.
Honestly, that's what I had, but like archaeological, I guess there's other evidence, right? Like the 3 kids in Portugal.
Okay,
Who
are you,
like
Sam, are you going to acknowledge that you actually don't have examples of archaeology confirming non-mundane claims in the Bible?
I mean, Sodom and Gomorrah is a pretty big one, but you're just gonna say that's not supernatural.
What's the
So,
but what's
Sam,
the archaeological
Sodom and
evidence?
Gomorrah, there isn't archaeological evidence of Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed. So when I ask you for something and then you fail to give it and you try to move on to the next thing in your script, and then I ask you, are you going to concede that point? You need to either concede that point, but if you get to either make the arguments or debunk them, but if you're going to do both, I don't need to be here.
Yeah, I'll concede that there's no archaeological evidence
Cool.
for that
Great.
I know of.
Thank you
for
so much.
supernatural.
10 out of 10. You're
Yeah.
awesome. What's next?
The 3 kids in Portugal who like kind of predicted the future, like they said that God had revealed it to them.
What did they predict?
Which was kind of
What did they
weird.
say?
The like World War II was a pretty big one. Like they had
What claim
warned
did they
people.
make?
They said that
They-
there was going to be a worse war that was going to come if people didn't turn to God.
Whoa. Hey, I'm going to make a claim right now, Sam. There's going to be another war.
Is this the Our Lady of Fatima stuff?
I'll do it right now. I'll give you some predictions right now, Sam, that are going to blow your mind. There's going to be an earthquake somewhere in the world, like soon, somewhere.
In the next 2
There's
hours.
going to be somewhere. There's going to be, I bet there's going to be murder. Someone's going to kill somebody. Like I bet today someone will, and that's my prediction. God's downloading it into my brain right now. There's going to be someone's going to get a cancer diagnosis today. Somebody's going to get a call from their doctor with a cancer diagnosis, and it's going to be really sad for them and their family. I'm making these prophecies right here. How do you think I'm doing this, Sam? What do you think could be how do you think I'm divining these predictions that are definitely going to come true? How do you think I'm doing that?
Right, I would agree. I would agree that you can just predict it, but the fact is that like they were little kids and they kind of like they predicted like the rise of like the USSR and like I don't know. I just think that's kind of weird.
Did they specifically say? Did they specifically say this is what's going to happen in this region of the world, and this is the person who's going to rise to power, and this is how it's going to happen? Or did they predict like the fall of a great nation and the rise of a new nation? Like, was it vague terminology like that?
It was incredibly vague. This is Our Lady of Fatima and the children associated with it. So Sam's getting a bunch of stuff by hearsay from glurred sites that spew out unchallenging and unskeptically evaluated claims. Here's the thing about a prophecy. A prophecy needs to be specific, answerable by a single occurrence, not subject to interpretation. Otherwise, you can make anything seem like prophecy and seem like fulfillment of prophecy. Even if someone made a specific, let's assume for a second that there were 3 kids that said, in 5 years, in this region, a new nation will rise, and it will be called the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. How do you prove, Sam, that they knew that because God told them?
I guess I can't prove that God told them, right? But there's pretty heavy speculation, like that it was probably supernaturally revealed.
No, Sam, has anything supernatural ever been confirmed in the history of the world?
Confirmed? No.
Cool. Why then would we care if someone speculates that the answer may be supernatural if we have no way to confirm it and nothing supernatural has ever been confirmed?
Well, just because we haven't confirmed something, I don't think we can just throw it out. No.
Correct. No, Sam. I'm
Mhm.
not saying that they didn't have a supernatural link. I'm saying we don't get to assume or conclude that there was a supernatural link. We do not even get to consider it a candidate explanation until such time it's been demonstrated to be a possible and probable explanation. So when I asked you, why would we consider it a candidate explanation? You, in your mind, immediately recognized, wow, this is a big problem. Why should I consider this a candidate explanation? And your brain switched into defensive mode and said, well, we can't just throw it out. Well, we're not throwing it out as untrue. We are throwing it out as unworthy of being considered amongst the candidate explanations, which is why when the house catches fire, shouldn't we also say maybe God just set your house on fire?
Well, I guess I mean, you could say that, right? Because he
Okay, this
created the
is
frame.
beyond ridiculous, Sam. Of course you could say that. The issue isn't could I utter those words? Should I utter those words? It is when we list the candidate explanations for your house burning down, and we list electrical fire, gas fire, intentionally set by a person, accidental fire. Should we include God lit your house on fire amongst the candidate explanations that we then evaluate?
Probably not. No.
Cool.
Right.
So why should we do it in a circumstance where there's no demonstration that it's even considered to be a candidate explanation? We have this other thing. Why do you think it's okay when somebody does something you don't understand to say maybe it was God? Well, maybe it was, but you have to actually demonstrate that it was God before we should accept that.
Right, and I would agree. Agree with you, right? But the thing is that they claimed it was God. Now I'm not saying just the claim is true, but the fact is that like 1,000 people,
Sam,
thousands of people
Sam,
agreed. Yeah.
God just told me that you don't care about truth.
Okay.
Do you believe me?
No.
Why not? It says here you're a theist, which means you believe in God, which we're pretty much on board now that you now believe something for which you don't have evidential warrant. So when I tell you that God tells me you don't believe in truth, you don't care about truth, what justification do you have for ruling that out?
Well, it's possible that he could have told you, but I don't really believe
How do you know
in
it's possible?
like
How do you know it's possible?
well, anything is possible. No.
No, it's not. Is a square circle possible? Is it possible for me to flap my arms and teleport to Mars?
Well, I wouldn't say it's absolutely not possible. Like there's
No. See,
well, no.
here's the confusion, Sam. I didn't ask you if you could prove it wasn't possible. I said you said it was possible that God told me this, and I asked how you know it's possible, and your answer was anything's possible, which is false. So, how do you know it's possible that God told me you don't care about truth?
I don't know it's possible.
Cool. In your view, can God lie?
No. I mean,
Cool.
I guess
So
he
if you
could.
say that it, well, you just went from no to yes quicker than I could point out the flaw in your reasoning. So let me get the flaw in your reasoning right here, which is if it's impossible for God to lie, and you think it's possible for God to tell me that you don't care about what's true, then you're acknowledging that you don't care about what's true. Because if God can't lie, and you said it's possible that God told me that, then you think it's possible that God, who always tells the truth, could tell me that, which means you acknowledge you don't care about the truth. This logic stuff is a bitch.
Well, I mean, I get where you're coming from. I guess, yeah. I guess I can't use the Portuguese kids. I guess, but I don't
At
know.
best,
There's other.
What would be really
best,
cool?
Sam?
What would
Go ahead.
go ahead? I was just gonna say, what
I
would
was
be
just
really
gonna-
cool for archaeological
We both
evidence of
just did. I was
supernat-
just gonna
Sorry.
say, it's so fucking
Sorry.
awesome.
Yeah. What would be really cool for archaeological evidence is like if there was archaeological evidence that at one point the entire Red Sea was split in half. If there was somehow like a dividing line or something like through where it was like, oh look, this is, if there was some way like, you know, to verify that geologically that happened, or if there was like a bush that is always on fire. There's a burning bush that's been burning for thousands of years somewhere in the Middle East, and you can visit it, and it continues to burn to this day. Or if there was somehow archaeological evidence of Lot's wife being turned into a pillar of salt, like if she was still there, if you could like go and you know, and even you know that like there was something about the construction of that pillar of salt that there was evidence that it was not naturally constructed, something like that would be archaeological evidence of something that goes beyond the mundane. And it doesn't seem like you've got anything that satisfies that, right, Sam?
Right. Yeah. No. I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And the weird thing is, if in fact, so like I don't know what God you're advocating for. I'm assuming some version of the biblical God you're convinced is true, or possibly probably true, or whatever else. If you're right and that God exists, why isn't it providing you with good evidence and good arguments for its existence?
Well, I think it would interfere with free will. No, like if he was to, are you saying like why doesn't he show himself, for example?
Well, you're just going with this archaeological speculation. And I'm sitting here saying, if God exists, why doesn't he just demonstrate that fact to anyone and everyone? Why do we have to have these discussions where it's speculative and maybe there's evidence and maybe God is like this and maybe God is like that? Because this is indistinguishable from a being that doesn't exist or a being that is punking you.
I think what I'm really trying to prove with the archaeological evidence, I don't really think I'm trying to prove God. Rather, I'm trying to prove that the stories in the Bible are credible, and we can take the stories from the Bible and possibly look at the supernatural claims further.
And what we're trying to impart to you, Sam, is that even if we could verify the mundane aspects of every single story in the Bible, if we could empirically, with it beyond a shadow of a doubt, verify every single one of those stories, none of that would even come close to adding credibility to any of the supernatural claims. That every single one of those stories could be 100% true in their mundane aspects, that like all of these cities existed and the events as depicted in the Bible happened that way, but all of the supernatural elements of God dealing with prophets and, you know, anything magic, when angels appear and do something magic, that all of that stuff could just be part of like how they chose to tell this history. It could just be the way that they chose to tell the story. None of that adds any credibility whatsoever to any of the supernatural claims. That's what we're trying to get across.
I agree with you. I'd even say I concede that it's not proof at all, but I think it makes it more probable. Like, wouldn't you say that?
So
no.
Does facts consistent with an explanation for an observation, do those facts make that more probable? Isn't the probability of God a fixed thing? I mean, God either exists or doesn't, and the likelihood of a God is fixed.
Yes, but I think between the 1 and 0, there's, you know, you can say that there's a probability between that, right? Wouldn't you say?
Well, I think I don't think it changes the probability of God. What it does is it changes the evidential support about whether or not you are warranted in accepting that a God exists. But if you're saying, hey, we found a body, my hypothesis is that the butler did it, and we start evaluating evidence, you don't get to say the body is evidence that the butler did it, because the body's there no matter who did it, even if it was natural causes. And if we found the butler's fingerprints in the room, that would not be evidence that the butler did it unless you showed that they occurred around this time and they're consistent with this and all this other stuff. So you can't just point to facts consistent with. I just did a video on my channel that shows the difference between evidence for a proposition, basically facts that most closely align with one candidate explanation more than others, or facts that are just consistent. So when we're trying to explain why is there a universe, why is there Earth, why is this way, we can have facts that are consistent with candidate explanations, but God isn't even a candidate explanation yet, because there's no demonstration that it's possible and no way to test for it. It's the reason we don't include it when your house catches fire. And if your house caught fire and we couldn't find an electrical fault and we couldn't find a chemical fault and we couldn't find anyone who had access to it, would we then have more evidence that God burned your house down? Would it be more probable?
No, but I don't think it's fair to say that God isn't a candidate. But because for you to say it's not a candidate, you have to.
You're wrong.
No, because
you're wrong. Something doesn't. I have a whole video on what is considered candidate explanations, and you've already acknowledged this, because when we said if the house catches on fire, do we even get to include God as a candidate explanation? You agreed that we shouldn't.
But we shouldn't rule him out. So it is.
That's not what I fucking said. That's not what I said, Sam. And every single time, I'm sorry. This is me and training for propositional logic. Every single time I make a claim about something, you invert it and do this affirming the consequence fallacy. I didn't say we should rule it out. I said it doesn't get to be considered a candidate explanation. When someone shows that God should be considered a candidate explanation, that's when it becomes one.
I agree, but until you rule it out, it is technically a candidate. So
no, sir.
Like same for the universe.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. You don't get to say, I agree, but, and you don't get to pretend that we need to rule it out. You know why? Because there are an infinite supply of bullshit, impossible candidate explanations that exist until you rule them out. This God, that God, the other God, those two gods together, these two gods while high on ketamine, these two gods while propping a finger up Elon Musk's ass, these two gods while this. There's an infinite series of candidate explanations. If you waited until you ruled them out before making the list, you would never get to decide anything. The reality is we consider the candidate explanations that have been shown to be warranted to include. And until such time as the God explanation, which by the way, isn't an explanation for anything, it's a panacea. You don't get to solve a mystery by appealing to a bigger mystery. But you should, your model of having to rule out and disqualify every potential candidate explanation is untenable and fallacious.
So I think I have a way to try to demonstrate this to you, Sam, too, that as far as, doesn't it, and Matt's completely right that you don't just have to, you can't you don't have to accept every single potential candidate explanation or possibility that could possibly exist in the universe just because they can't be empirically definitively ruled out. You would be doing that ad nauseum forever if that's how you tried to operate. But I also want to say, when it comes to this idea of doesn't it lend credibility to, so like this idea of if we could establish evidence, hard evidence for every mundane claim in the Bible, wouldn't it lend credibility to the supernatural claims? So let's say that I tell you a story about my day, and I say I got up today and I went to go get coffee at a coffee shop, and I bought coffee and a muffin, and then I went to the store to get toothpaste because my toothpaste had ran out. So I got some new toothpaste, and then when I went out into the parking lot to get back in my car, a talking cat rode up on a skateboard, did a kickflip, jumped up and said, "Hey, dude, how you doing?" And then he flew away into the sky. Now, let's say we have CCTV of me getting into my car and driving to the coffee shop. The coffee shop has security camera footage of me ordering my coffee. We have eyewitness testimony and security footage of me at the grocery store getting my toothpaste. We have eyewitnesses, who saw me going out into the parking lot to get to my car. Does all of this lend credibility to the talking cat doing a kickflip and flying away into the sky?
I'm gonna be honest. I think it's worth investigating.
No, you don't.
How
No,
do
you don't, Sam.
How do you propose investigating that, Sam?
Well, I don't know. I guess through logic and reasoning, but it is
Sam, be
reasonable
honest.
to investigate.
I don't think you know enough about logic and reasoning because you keep offering fallacies and then you suggest it's worth investigating. Logic and reasoning aren't tools of investigation. They're tools of evaluation.
Right. And I don't know, but I know
Sam,
I'm going to
just-
say it again, but you can't rule out the possibility that it didn't
Sam,
happen. And I get.
Sam,
I know.
be honest. Be honest with us and be honest with yourself.
This is so bullshit.
Is it reasonable to believe that I saw a cat that did a kickflip and said, "Hey, dude," and then flew away into the sky? Be honest with yourself and be
No,
honest with us.
not.
Is that a reasonable thing to include? Thank you. That's it.
It's not.
It's just you
Yeah.
don't need to pretend like it is. It's okay. That's all we're trying to get to. Is it's totally okay to say there's no reasonable reason why you should believe any of the supernatural truth claims of the Bible just because you might be able to verify some mundane claims made in that book.
Yes.
Right. Sure. Okay, I agree.
There you go. Cool.
Even if, yeah.
Sam, stop.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
Sam, stop. You just said right, I agree. And unlike the other times, you didn't do right, but just agree and we'll move on. When you come up with something better, call back.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate the call.
End on a
Okie
positive.
dokie. Well, what's that?
End on a positive. There
Yeah,
are few
yeah.
things more frustrating than to sit here and give a philosophy 101 lecture for 2 or 3 minutes, and when you're done, have the other person go, right, but
I'm glad that we got him to a place of being like, okay, I get it. I get how credible evidence of mundane, normal things does not work as, does not add credibility to supernatural claims. I'm glad we at least got there. I hope that he continues to probe that in his own time. And if he does continue to probe it and still feels like he's bumping up against a wall, he's always welcome to call us back and call us back with whatever it is that he's run into next.
And it's cool because, there are people constantly trying to find archaeological evidence supports the Bible, but the most they could ever do, as far as I can tell, is have archaeological evidence that supports the mundane facts about the Bible. Even if you found a pillar of salt in the shape of a woman, the miraculous thing would be that it had survived all of these years, not any confirmation that it used to be a physical, biological human woman. How do you show that salt used to be person? I mean, that's beyond our ability to investigate as well. And so, what strikes me as plausible for a story like that? I've seen countless really cool rock features that carved out by wind and water, including big rocks balanced on a little spire and have been there for hundreds of thousands of years or however long. And this rock looks just like a face because we see faces all the time. It would be completely unsurprising to me to find a stalagmite style rock formation that looks a lot like a woman and might even be the color of salt or have, something that would be wholly unsurprising. And then can you imagine the people around there saying, hey, that stone over there looks just like a woman. And then somebody goes, yeah, it turns out once upon a time, this man and his wife were being rescued from here by God. And she was told not to turn around. And she did, and God punished her by turning her to salt. As if, hang on, how is that a punishment? Why is that something that a God would do? God can erase you from existence. God can spirit you away to an afterlife. He strikes everybody else dead. You pick up sticks on the Sabbath, you accidentally touch the ark in order to steady it. Boom, you're dead. Ha ha ha. Why on earth would God in this one instance decide to turn someone from our biological structure into NaCl just so that the water makes it go away? Also that, and knowing in advance that this was going to happen, if God has advanced knowledge, or at least suspecting that this is what's going to happen, and setting it all up so that that woman's daughters can get their dad drunk and sleep with them. I mean, the Bible stories just don't make sense. It's like the genie from Aladdin is way better, because when he's complaining about, all these powers, itty bitty, ability, God has infinite power, and people are impressed that he turned somebody to salt. Please. I'm waiting for Penn and Teller to do that.
Yeah, I feel like they could.
We could.
Pretty impressively. Yes. I kind of want to just I kind of want this to be our last call. You think that's all right?
Yeah, good.
If we wrap up here, I feel like I've got a pack for a trip that I'm going on, that I'm leaving to the airport in a couple hours. So I'm going to wrap up here with Ted from Tennessee. Ted, I'm interested in this talking point. It says that you were having this conversation with a pastor friend of yours. Ted, you're on with Matt and Austin. Tell us about it.
Hey, so thank you all for having me on. I'm a big fan of the show. So anyway, I have to tell you a little bit about me to understand why we were having the conversation. And I'll try to keep it brief and as vague as possible. I'm a sexual abuse survivor. And so I have gone full-blown atheist. I do not believe in a God anymore. I certainly don't believe in the Christian God. I find no reasonable argument for God, but I still like to have the conversation with a pastor friend of mine about God and why his God seems to be sleeping on the job. And so his argument to me is that the stuff that I've gone through and the trials that I've had and the sexual abuse and everything, that suffering brings about the character of Christ. And my argument to him is that the suffering I went through and the long amount of suffering that I went through didn't make me a better Christian. It just drove me insane. I actually developed multiple personalities, and I'm in therapy for that, getting help for it. But suffering, I think the Christian claim that suffering makes us better is bogus. And I was wondering, in your guys' experience in dealing with Christian and pastors, and you come up with a subject of suffering, what you all think about it.
Well, first of all, I will say, A, I'm sorry that happened to you. B, I think that this is one of those things where, like, religion makes it demonstrates how religion can make otherwise good people say and do really, really horrific things. I think it's really kind of monstrous to tell a person who suffered like that, no, here's why that had to happen, because it brings about the character of Christ to be molested by an adult when you're a child. I think that's a really fucked up and evil rationalization and worldview. So I'm sorry that that's said to you. I think that gets said to people in all different kinds of abusive, harmful ways. And again, it's like, I think it's people just trying to make sense of, like, why do bad things happen to good people? All that being said, I am philosophically interested in the merits of sort of this kind of seesaw of balance that exists in the world. Like, I'm an actor and a filmmaker, and I'm really fascinated by stories like, people will say this when you're making your first films, they'll go, I hope the shark doesn't work for you. And what they mean by that is, when Steven Spielberg was making the movie Jaws, he had this big animatronic shark that was supposed to be in all of these different scenes, and it was supposed to do all these cool stunts, and it was supposed to be able to swallow people whole, and it was supposed to feature in the film a lot more than it did. And what happened is this shark kept malfunctioning on set because he was a young filmmaker. They were trying something that hadn't really been done before. It was a lot of trial and error, and the whole production process was a total headache. And stories go that he ran into friends after he shot the film, and they said, "How'd it go?" And he goes, "Oh, it was a disaster. We didn't get the movie in the can. We didn't get like half of our shot list accomplished because this mechanical shark wouldn't work." And what wound up making the movie work is the fact that they had to shoot around this shark that wasn't working, and having the shark in less of the film actually made the shark a more effective character. And then you look at and I'm a huge Wes Anderson fan, and he just came out with a new movie. And you look at the careers of people like Steven Spielberg and Wes Anderson, and as they get older and more established in the industry, they have fewer and fewer things go wrong on their sets because every designer that works for them, every person that steps onto one of their sets knows what's expected of them, that everything has to work as it is pitched to work. Everything has to be ready on the day. And there's fewer and fewer obstacles for them to do what they want to do. And I believe that their work is less interesting as a result. It's just like there's fewer faults in it. But again, this is my subjective assessment of art and what suffering in art was able to do for it as far as how interesting it is to me. I still think from a philosophical perspective that telling someone who has been abused, "Oh, here's why you were abused, here's why God allowed that to happen to you," is disgusting. And I also think that it's hugely fallacious, because in order for there to be some kind of universal principle of suffering equals the character of Christ, it would mean that suffering needs to be doled out evenly, that everyone needs to suffer equally and evenly, and that this God who's trying to impart the character of Christ into us needs to have some kind of structure wherein we all get the same amount of suffering, and we all get to feel suffering. But obviously we know that suffering doesn't work that way. We know that the world is that people are given more than their fair share of suffering all the time. And there are a lot of people who are given far less than their fair share of suffering. And, it doesn't really seem to work out that there's some kind of divine intelligence that's trying to impart some kind of lesson to us. But all that being said, I just, as a hobbyist and artist and filmmaker, I find it interesting, this sort of correlation between the struggle in making art and how that can create something unintentionally more interesting or beautiful in the end. That's my thoughts. Matt, do you have thoughts on this?
I'm going to keep it real short because I don't know how beneficial this is going to be for Ted. Ignore them, Ted, and get back to just taking care of yourself. From an argument standpoint, what's happened is there's a model of Christianity in particular that was spread in the process of proselytizing that gave people a particular view of a God. And when people started raising concerns about, well, hang on, why is there so much suffering and unnecessary suffering in this world if there's a God who's protecting us from it, or could be protecting us from it? And the standard apologetic is because this life is not the goal. It's the next life that is the goal. And this is a fallen, broken world, and it's our fault. And the suffering you experience here, Mother Teresa was a huge fan of suffering to the point that she was a monstrous, fucking disgusting ghoul. And I highly recommend everybody read Christopher Hitchens' book, The Missionary Position, which is all about Mother Teresa. But it made this point of, oh, the suffering you go through is to, it's your fault, it's our fault, we brought sin and death into the world, and all of it's there to teach you to suffer the way Christ suffered for your sins, so that if you are amongst those that are redeemed by the grace of God, you will have the appropriate understanding and you will live forever in paradise, and blah, 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 fucking blah. And what's ended up happening is they have that excuse now. And so because they don't understand this any better than anybody else, and because they don't have any way to explain why there's extra egregious, unwarranted suffering, both at the hands of humans and just at the hands of nature. I mean, there are worms that nest in children's eyeballs and eat their way out. That seems to me to be wholly unnecessary to any God's plan for anything, including punishing for sin. Cancer and terminal illnesses in infants that never survive beyond a year. That to me makes no sense for any plan that a God could have. And so what can they do? Well, they come up with what they can, which is, the purpose of that child's existence was to teach the parents and the people who loved it some sort of valuable lesson. Their suffering is an empathy, and they're only suffering because they loved that child so much. And it teaches them a lesson that when you love, you're going to get hurt, and it's how you overcome that. And when you just can't take any more hurt, you just need to reach out to Jesus, right? Reach out to Jesus right now. Take him by the hand, and he will help you out of that suffering. And so it is a targeted way to make you both continue to be a victim and be satisfied. Sorry, let me back up for a callback. Content in being a victim. It's disgusting. It is unworthy of a moment's consideration. It demonstrates that if that God exists, he is an immoral monster. And you have found one of the primary objections, and there is no good solution. And your preacher friend is as much a victim, spewing out the garbage that he was convinced he needed to share to other people, when in fact, he should keep his fucking mouth shut and stop pretending like he knows or understanding anything about this, and not interfere with other people's therapy or lives or anything else. I would tell him to fuck right off. But I'm in Zen mode, so I would say, hi, I think you need to fuck right off. Thanks.
I agree. I've really struggled with it because according to them, their God, if their God is real, they let all this bad shit happen to a lot of people, not just me. I mean, there are lots of people who are victims of horrible things, and yet their thought process is we still owe him an apology. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, because I became a Christian when I was 13 years old. After I became a Christian, that God, if he's real, and I'm not assuming that he is, still allowed just awful things to happen to me. And yet it's still, well, you should, and when I asked him the question again about suffering, he said, well, you're avoiding the gospel. I'm like, well, no, I'm engaging in the gospel. Your gospel says that your God has good plans for us. Your gospel says that your God cares about us. Your gospel says that he died for us to take away his sins. But yet he still allows all these bad things to happen to everybody. And like you said, and about the worms, and it's just awful stuff that happens. And it has driven me to the point where I'm just convinced there is no God.
Psychologically, it actually is. This is another callback on this episode. It is abuse, and it is perpetrated like abuse. So it's done in the exact same way, where it's like, I'm going to inflict all of this really, really horrific harm on you, and then I'm going to tell you that this was for your own good, or that you are you caused this to happen, that you are the cause of this. And then this is people in abusive relationships, they'll be dealing with a person who will, make themselves a victim. An abuser will make themselves a victim by doing something, like say they wake up early and they make breakfast for their partner who they're abusing, or whatever it is. Let's say it's an abusive partnership. And they wake up in the morning and they make breakfast, and then they tell their partner, how could you not, when the next time they're being abusive, do you remember when I made breakfast for you? Do you remember that thing I did for you? And this is sort of the thing of like, Christ died for you. He was whipped with a cat of nine tails for you, and it's like, I didn't fucking ask him to do that. I didn't say, and it's this abusive tactic of like, do you know what he went through for you and what you owe him? Do you understand? While they're actively in the process of heaping suffering on you and telling you that the suffering is for your own good, It's your fault. You should be thankful for it. And then they're also telling you you owe the person who is heaping the suffering on you this massive debt of gratitude because of this nice thing they did for you that you didn't even fucking ask them to do. And
Somebody needs
so,
to, somebody needs to,
yeah.
sorry. Somebody needs to explain to God that in love, you don't keep score.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That if it really was a sacrifice, if it really was a gesture of pure love, if it really was done for us as a sacrifice of pure love, then we don't need to say thank you for that. We don't, it's not, well, hey, I did something nice for you and I'm going to expect you to get me back for that later. You know, you owe me now. That's not how that shit works. Any imperfect person who has a decent heart and a decent conscience knows that that's not how acts of service and acts of love work. They're not bargaining chips to be used, you know, to guilt people into doing what you want them to do. And so it's textbook actual abuse.
Right. So would you guys, like, if you were in my situation, would you cut I mean, so the problem I have is, like, everybody around me is Christian, and I don't have any real, like, atheist friends that I can really talk to. Even my counselor she's not like a devoted Christian, but she's like a liberal Christian. Would you guys just cut off the Christians altogether and just leave them in the dust, or would you all continue to try to engage? And I know that by continuing to engage, that they're continuing the abuse by telling me this. But what do I do in the instance of trying to find better people to hang out with? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there's no guarantee that it's going to be easy. There are online groups you can reach out to. I would consider, first of all, I'd consider reaching out to Recovering from Religion and possibly some national organizations to have them put you in touch with state directors to see if there are local things in your area. You're in Tennessee. Are you going to NanoCon in Nashville, or can you get to NanoCon in Nashville, which is, honey, is it the July 20th weekend?
Yeah, I think it's July, whatever the 20th-ish weekend is, 25th, 26th, and 27th.
If you can get to NanoCon, if that's a viable option for you just to get there, I would recommend that you go and interact with some people. And if you can't afford the ticket, but you can get there, I'll buy your ticket.
Oh, thank you. I have to look at work calendars and budget and stuff like that to see. I can't give you an answer right now. But thank you so much.
Just reach out by email, and if you're able to get there, but you won't have the money to get in, I will either buy a ticket or I'll talk to the organizers and see if we can. Because I was going to go, but I can't go, and Arden is going. And one way or another, if you can get to Nashville for that and it's viable, I will find a way to get you in.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Matt.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Can I ask one question? What's NanoCon?
My email address?
Oh, what's NanoCon?
NanoCon is the Nashville Nuns Convention. So it is a bunch of godless heathens getting together in the Nashville area to listen to speakers and have fun and engage with each other. It's a way of building community. It's genuinely one of my, there's a handful of conventions that I always say yes to if at all possible. And the only reason I'm not able to go to this one is because Arden and I can't both be gone right now with the animals and our obligations there. But yeah, it's one of the 3 or 4 best favorite conferences of mine.
Oh, okay. Very cool. I would love to go to it. What is, and that would be my second question. What is your email address?
Yep. It's sans.deity@gmail.com. sans.deity@gmail.com.
Sorry, I'm writing it
You
down.
got that?
Yes.
Sans
SANS dot
DEITY.
Right. Is it SAM or SAN? I'm sorry.
N as in Nathan.
As in, yeah. It's sans, as in French for without, deity, as in God. So sans deity.
Okay.
Without God.
All right. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And now my social security number. I'm kidding. That was great, Damien.
I'm
Ted,
sorry,
thanks
I
so
couldn't
much
hear
for
you.
the call.
It bleeped out.
Oh, it was just a joke. But about
okay.
Matt said, and now my social security number, which was a joke. But thank
yes,
you
from
so
the
much.
old Lifeline commercial.
Right. Thank you so much for the call. Hope you have a wonderful day, and hope you're able to continue working on trying to build community with other atheists and people who are like-minded, so that you don't feel like, you're just out there by yourself. And I hope that this NanoCon things works out. And yeah, thanks for calling, Ted.
Thank you. Y'all have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Take care. All right.
Okay, I think that does it for us with the calls. Pretty good, pretty decent. How do you feel, Matt?
I wore a shirt that was way too hot for today. It's a really thick fabric and long sleeves, but I was chilly when I got out of the shower, and I was like, oh, let me just put that on. And now it's been too hot. So let's end this this Zen show so I can go be angry about something offline.
Yeah. All righty. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for the super chats.
Go to linemerch.com and patreon.com/calltheline. Don't forget about all the other shows on the line, including the Sunday show After Dark in an hour and 40 minutes right back here. Same badass fucking Zen channel, different time.